You're tuned in to Horror Slop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is Horror Slop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
Dad shut himself inside his bunker at the start of the pandemic. 3 months ago, we lost contact with him, by odd directions. Dad shut himself inside his bunker at the beginning of 2020. He said the world was about to end, and when we didn't believe him, he told us to wake up. It was raining that day. I remember focusing on the water hitting the window panes while my sister tried to change Dad's mind. I knew it was no use. He was too stubborn to listen to anyone except maybe Donald Trump, who had just declared that COVID-19 had pushed the world into a pandemic. Dad wanted us to join him, and when we told him no, he called us brainwashed. He purchased the land before I was born, only because of the dilapidated military facility that came with it. It was abandoned sometime in the 60s, I think. My sister was there from the beginning, even before Dad's obsession pushed Mom away. It's hard for me to imagine what he was like back then. Mom says he was a gentleman. But they married young, and a person can change a lot during those years. And so did Dad. All I remember from him during childhood are the weekends at the bunker, constantly renovating it and stockpiling it with everything he would need to survive down there. "You think he's okay?" my sister said. "He wasn't in great health." I told him. We sat in the car, on our way to check up on him, driving through the heat wave. And number X200B. ////. It was dark when we arrived. Dad's truck stood where he had left it, beneath some tarp that blew in the chilly, sand-carrying wind. We turned on our flashlights and walked to the cliff above the bunker. The steel door was made to withstand a nuclear blast. Luckily, I owned the only spare key in existence. Before I used it, I banged on the door as hard as I could and yelled for Dad. I worried he would mistake us for intruders and shoot us. If he was confused, and if it was dark, it was a real possibility. I banged again and yelled at the top of my lungs. "Dad, are you there? It's me, Josh. Evelyn is here as well." I was 17 the last time I was here. Back then it was the Muslims that were going to end civilization as we knew it. Before that, it was the Russians. Now it was China. There was always something threatening his beloved freedom, and yet he was never truly free. My sister put her hand on my wrist just as I was about to unlock the door. I tried the light switch at the bottom. The click echoed throughout the long corridor leading to the living area. Nothing happened. I realized that the batteries, which he charged by the use of an old exercise bike, were dead. That meant he was most likely dead as well. The generator could be broken, I said. But maybe you should wait back here, just in case, you know. The Confederate flag greeted us at the end of the corridor. It hung on the concrete wall. It looked pale in the hot spot of the flashlight, almost like a phantom. And, of course, in many ways it was. A ghost from a time long ago. Or perhaps a corpse brought back to life. An abomination. It reminded me of Dad more than anything else. We entered the main chamber. It was overfilled with litter and clutter. Empty cans, both the food and beer kinds, lay scattered across the sticky floor. We had to take large steps not to step on any of the trash. My hair stood up on my neck before I even realized what she meant. The table was set for 3 people. I didn't say anything for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing, and just when I was about to speak my sister interrupted me. Who the fuck was here with him? Dad! I yelled. It's me, Josh. You there? I'm afraid, Evelyn whispered. Something isn't right. That's not supposed to be there. I slowly walked toward it. That must have been what he talked about over the radio. Dad had hacked away a layer of concrete, for whatever reason, and uncovered a rusty, metal door behind it. It stood ajar. A lukewarm, musty breeze came out of it. My sister walked up to me as I carefully pried the door open with the back of my flashlight. I felt my heart in my throat. I could hear my sister begging for us to leave, almost in tears. But I needed to know what was behind that door. It was imperative to understand what had happened here. I needed to know. I needed closure. It's warm, I said. The air, I mean. Josh. Please. Just give me a moment to think. I walked toward the hallway that led to the other rooms, desperately hoping to find him. For some reason, it was important for me to see him. To be able to leave without wondering. I needed to know that he was truly dead. I stopped myself after I accidentally pointed the flashlight on the floor in the middle of the hallway, revealing a pair of feet. I think I found him. I ran up to the body. There was nothing that could explain this, and the more my mind tried to, moving in an endless loop doing so, the dread grew inside me. I only got a glimpse of the body before I panicked, but my sister was right. The half-rotten face was the same as mine, with a bullet hole in the middle of the forehead. Josh. Is that you? Josh. Dad? I yelled back. What the fuck is going on here? Silence. Something is wrong, Evelyn said. I don't think. I turned to my sister. Go back up. I'll get that old bastard out of there. We'll be right behind you, okay? Think, Josh. Evelyn begged. You think he's been stuck under a shelf for? I should have listened, but even after what we had just seen I just couldn't bring myself to even consider something as outlandish as what my sister was suggesting. It was simply too far-fetched, too unbelievable to penetrate all my layers of presumptions about reality. It couldn't be, it just couldn't. Hence, I ran back to the hallway, yelling for my sister to get back up to the surface and wait for us there. I'm coming, Dad. I was frozen in place, both by fear and confusion, unable to make any decisions. Come on, Josh. Dad kept yelling. I need your help, son. My mind was racing. There was no way of knowing who was who. When I heard Dad's voice yelling for help while watching his dead body, nothing but absolute terror reverberated inside me. I slowly reached for the journal in Dad's lap and grabbed it, hoping it would shed some light on the situation. I was just about to open it when my sister screamed. I ran back, this time jumping over my doppelganger's body, and found her looking at something at the corner of the main chamber. I told you to, I said, but changed my mind. Are you okay? What happened? She cried. It's me. Crawled up in the corner was her naked, dead body. Her head had been twisted in such a way that the neck had been broken. ///// And number X200B. And number X200B. Found a hidden door. And number X200B. Evelyn and Josh woke me up. A surprise visit. Didn't hear them enter. Strange. And number X200B. I shot the son of a bitch right between the eyes. God forgive me. And number X200B. And number X200B. And number X200B. My sister has been cooking for hours. She just called for me from the kitchen. Josh. Come here, I want to show you something. Me.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
I think my girlfriend is hiding something from me, by Zealous Ideal, or 9989. I've been with my girlfriend, Eve, for close to a year now, and I gotta say, life has never been this good. She's beautiful, funny, supportive, the list goes on. All I could ever want. But a few weeks ago, I started noticing her acting strangely. I've begun to realize she's hiding something from me. It started one night when we were watching TV. I'm just gonna get a snack, she said, getting up and going into the kitchen. I smiled at her and carried on watching TV. But a few moments later, I heard her whispering very faintly. Of course, it's not weird for people to talk to themselves, hell, I do it, but something about it was suspicious. She almost sounded apologetic. In fact, I'm almost certain I heard her whisper the words, "I'm sorry." I got up as quietly as I could and peeked through the door into the kitchen. The window was wide open, and she was retreating her hand as though she had just reached outside. "It's pouring it down out there," I said. I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw that there were muddy footprints on the patio, below the kitchen window, that went striding off into the grass and heading toward the trees. So there was someone out there last night. I marched back inside and went upstairs to find Eve blow-drying her hair. "What are you talking about? Why are there muddy footprints in our garden? I saw you reaching out of the window last night, and I heard you whispering. Who was there? What's going on?" I felt my heart beating intensely. I was mad, but also creeped out. Upon hearing my words, her face turned from confused to irritated, with a glimmer of panic. "I don't know what you're talking about." She turned around to face me. "If there are footprints, it's probably from when I put your boots on this morning to take the trash out. The kitchen bin was full." My mind raced, but I decided to act cool whilst thinking of a plan to catch her out in whatever funny business she, or her mystery visitor, decided to conduct next. But only a few nights after the kitchen incident, anticipating Eve's arrival home, I got a text. Later on, my eyes pried themselves open to the sound of someone moving around. I had inadvertently fallen asleep earlier. Now, it was pitch black. The bedroom door creaked open, and Eve came in as quietly as she could. Pretending I was still asleep, I left my eyes open just a crack to observe her. I couldn't see much, but she undressed and got into bed next to me. She smelled earthy, like wet leaves. I glanced over at the digital clock on my bedside table. When I saw the time, I felt anger and panic sear through me. Dirt and undergrowth from the woods. Her boots were filthy. So she tracked it in last night. What the hell was she doing in the woods at 4 a.m.? I was angry, confused, and slightly afraid. I left, slamming the door in frustration. I needed to figure this out. What was she doing? I asked myself aloud. Having a fucking bonfire? Has she lost her mind? As I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. One of the big trees at the foot of the clearing had a big symbol carved into it, a sun, with flickering rays. Beneath it some words were inscribed. When I got back, I decided to look around the house, and Eve's belongings, for something to try and explain this. She had lots of notebooks and diaries, all filled with mundane work-related things. But in the wardrobe, in a shoe box, I found a leather-bound book I hadn't seen before. On the cover was a golden symbol, the same sun symbol I had seen earlier. As I skimmed through the remaining pages, there were many different entries, dating back to 1976. Although all the handwriting was different, the language appeared to be the same, but I couldn't recognize it and neither could Google Translate. The most recent entries into the book were unmistakably written by Eve. "Oh my God," she gasped. "What is it?" I asked. "Josh and Katie had another fight. She said he hit her then bolted off." "Jesus, what?" I asked, sitting up eagerly. No, it's fine. Go be with her," I replied. I knew it was all a lie. The texts were real, but I knew Katie was in on this whole freak show, whatever it was. Eve kissed me goodbye and hurried outside to the car, speeding off into the night. I shot up off the sofa and got dressed. If she was heading to the woods in the car to avoid my seeing her, she'd have to drive all the way around to the other side of it, park somewhere on a country lane, and follow the trail, which would take her about 30 minutes. That gave me plenty of time to get there first and hide out, phone camera at the ready. I waited and waited, and the night grew dark. I kept checking my phone. It became 11:30 p.m. The big, bright full moon of the summer solstice was glistening down, and it illuminated the clearing, making it look ghostly. It was almost midnight and I had been waiting about an hour and a half. I was ready to leave when I heard voices chattering from a distance. There were quite a few people approaching the clearing, it sounded like. I peered down and saw a group of people, including Eve and Katie and some other older men and women. They were all wearing some kind of weird protective gray clothing, as though they were dealing with chemicals. Altogether there were 11 of them. Oddly, I noticed, Eve, Katie and one other woman were carrying sacks that looked pretty heavy and were clanking loudly, while a few others were carrying shovels. I was confused. But in mere moments, my confusion turned to horror. I looked on in bewilderment. Katie reached into one of the sacks and pulled out a huge, curved blade. She walked calmly over to Josh, who began screaming. His scream was cut short as she swung the blade into his neck. He made a stomach-turning gurgle, collapsing from his knelt position onto the ground. Katie put her foot on his chest and yanked the knife out. Dark blood squirted out in pulses. She hacked again, and again, until his head came off. The others cheered, and Katie grabbed his severed head by the hair and threw it into the fire. "It is," Eve assured. "No one comes here, especially not at this time." "Eve," began Katie. My ears perked up. "Why don't you do the honors whilst Jacob sets up the spit?" Eve approached Josh's body, and I looked away, covering my ears. I started crying. It poured out of me, and I fought back sobs, only allowing silent convulsions. When I looked back, they were all stood, and an elderly woman who had previously remained hooded stepped forward. I didn't know what time it was, but eventually, they had finished. After a while, they had dug an extremely deep hole. Katie fished Josh's charred head out of the fire and threw it in. A few others used the shovels to scrape what was left in the fireplace into the hole as well, and then what little remained of Josh went in. When I finally dared to open them, it was light. Birds twittered around me. Everyone had gone. The clearing looked normal, save for the big patch of fresh dirt. Soon enough, that would blend in with the rest of the undergrowth. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. The air around me was electric with fear. I threw off my jacket, descending the tree carefully. I looked around for my phone to call the police. But I couldn't find it. I kept searching frantically, but it was nowhere. Shit. Shit. That man must have found it.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
Omnigel, Your Antidote to the Poison of Reality, by Unalloyed Saintrina. It's weightless, carbohydrate-free, and keto-friendly. It's non-toxic, locally sourced, and cruelty-minimized. It's silky smooth. Rejuvenating. Invigorating. Handcrafted. All-natural. Exclusive. For the everyman. State-of-the-art. Older than time itself. Sure, my disinterest was maybe a bit rude. But in my defense, I ain't the one investing in the product. Barely had the capital to invest in the 6 to 8 Miller Lights that nursed me to sleep the night prior. No, I was the guinea pig. Guinea pigs don't need the sales pitch. Please, continue, I stammered. Well, sir, I'm just here to get paid. And I apologize, I'm not used to the whole dog and pony show. Usually, I just take the pills and report the side effects. But, I'm appreciative of. He cut me off. I'm not going home. I asked. No, you're not going home, Frederick, he replied. The car I used to drive there, obviously, a beat-up sedan that was the lone blemish in a parking lot otherwise gleaming with BMWs and Lamborghinis. I was going to explain that I needed my car, but he was chatting with someone by the time I worked up the courage to speak again. It seemed important. I didn't want to interrupt. Could figure out how to get my car later, I supposed. That said, I didn't appreciate the secrecy. No one informed me of our destination. Nobody mentioned it was a goddamned hour outside the city. After 30 minutes passed, I was knocking on the black-tinted partition, asking the driver if they had any updates or an ETA, but they didn't respond. I stepped out of the parked car, loose gravel crunching under my feet. The executive had already arrived, and he was leaning against a separate, longer, more luxurious-appearing limousine. He sprang up and strolled towards me, arms outstretched as if he were going to pull me into a hug or something. Thankfully, he just wrapped one arm around my shoulder, his Rolodex ticking in my ear. Well, thanks, sir, but where are we? Well, my boy, you're home, of course. What do you mean? And what does this have to do with Ovigil? I shut my mouth and focused on marching in lockstep with the executive. A few silent seconds later, we were in front of a door. I didn't even notice there was a door until he was reaching for the knob. The entrance was tiny and without signage, barely a toenail on the foot of the Colossus, blending seamlessly into the corrugated metal wall. Fearful of upsetting him again, I wandered into the belly of the beast, but I was wholly ill-prepared for what awaited me. I crossed the threshold. Before long, I couldn't move. Bewilderment stitched my feet to the ground. When he claimed I was home, he hadn't lied. No figure of speech, no metaphor. It looked like I was standing on my neighbor's lawn. Everything had been painstakingly recreated. The feeling of the executive once again curling his muscular biceps around my shoulder shut me up. Pretty neat, huh? You see, we need to know how people will use Omnigel in the wild, and when we heard tale of your legendary compliance through the grapevine, we felt confident that you'd agree to participate in this unorthodox study. He reeled me into his chest, slow and steady like a fishing line, and once I was snugly fixed to his side, he started dragging me towards my ersatz home. Frederick, We wanted you to experience the bliss of Omnigel in the comfort of your home, but, at the end of the day, we're a pharmaceutical company. Science, statistics, objectivity, they're a coven of cruel, unyielding mistresses, but we're beholden to their demands nonetheless, and they demand we have control. The family photographs hung too low. The ceramic of the bowl that I'd throw my keys into after a shift at the bar was the wrong shade of brown. The floor mat was too weathered. Or maybe it wasn't weathered enough. The only difference, the only meaningful difference, anyway, is the Omnigel we left for you on the dining room table. I won't bother giving you a tour. Feels redundant, don't you think? Now, my instructions for you are very straightforward. Live your life as you normally would. Use the Omnigel as you see fit. We're paying you by the hour. Stay as long as you'd like. When you're done, just walk outside, and a driver will take you home. I spied an unlabeled mason jar half filled with grayish oil at the center of my dining room table. I turned around. The executive loomed in the doorway. Don't know when he let go of my shoulder. He chuckled and lit a cigarette. What a peculiar thing to say, when you're done here, in your home, walk outside and we'll take you home. How much will you be paying me an hour? He responded with a figure that doesn't bear repeating here, but know that the dollar amount was truly obscene. The executive took a long, blissful drag. He exhaled. As a puff of smoke billowed from his lips, he let the still-lit cigarette fall into the palm, and then he crushed the roiling ember in his hand. He grinned and gave me an answer. Yes. Yup. Correct. Turn it all on. Not sure how long I stood there, just listening. Eventually, I tiptoed forward. My eyes peeked over the doorframe. The street was empty and motionless, no kids, or canines, or cars, and I couldn't see the executive. It took a while, but I managed to tear myself away from the door frame. I shuffled into the living room, plopped down in my recliner, and clicked on the TV. Honestly, I adjusted quickly. If reality ever slipped in, if I ever became unnerved, the dollar amount I was being paid per hour would flash in my head, and I'd settle. Grabbing a beer from the fridge, a self-satisfied smile grew across my face. What a dumb plan, I thought. As I was returning to my recliner, I caught a glimpse of the mason jar. I slowed to a stop. But I mean, what if I leave without trying it and the executive ends up being aggravated with me? They must have spent a fortune to set this all up. I could just try it once, and that'd be that. Guess I'll rub a little on the back of my hand and call it a day. Right before the substance touched my skin, a burst of high-pitched static exploded from somewhere within the house. I jumped and lost my footing on the way down, my ass hitting the floor with a painful thud. My heart pounded against the back of my throat. After a handful of crackles and feedback whines, a deep voice uttered a single word. Over the course of a few moments, confusion devolved into raw, unbridled disorientation. He was a strange creature, only 2 feet tall, naked as the day he was born, caked in viscera and convulsing on the salmon-colored floor with a pathetic intensity. Eventually, he ceased his squirming. He took a moment to catch his breath, sat up, and brushed the hair from his face. I was surprised to discover that he looked like me. Smaller, sure, but the resemblance was indisputable. He smiled at me, but he had no teeth to bare. Unadorned pink gums to match the pink walls. I smiled back to be polite. Then, he pointed up, calling attention to our shared container. Were the walls a mucosa, I wondered. In other words, were we both confined within a different person's stomach? He clapped and summoned a blood-soaked cheer from his nascent vocal cords, as if responding to things I didn't say out loud. I looked back at him and scowled. The correction I offered was absurd, but it seemed to make sense at the time. "No, you idiot, we're not in a stomach. Where's the acid? And the walls are much too polished to be living," I claimed. "Look again. The answer is simple. We're in a mason jar that someone's holding. The pink color is obviously their palm being pressed into the glass." One evening, maybe about a week in, I dreamt of consuming the Omnigel, something I'd been choosing to ignore. In the dream, I drove a teaspoon into the jar and put a scoop close to my lips. When I wasn't chastised by some electric voice rumbling from the walls, I placed the oil into my mouth. I wanted to see what it tasted like, and, my God, the feeling that followed its consumption was euphoric. I mean, I don't know if that's true. Someone was probably watching. What I'm saying is manners felt like overkill, and I was hungry for something other than alcohol. Just like in my dream, I wasn't scolded, but I wasn't filled with euphoria in the wake of consuming the Omnigel either. It didn't taste bad. It didn't taste good. The oil didn't really have any flavor to speak of, and I could barely sense it on my tongue. It slid down my throat like a gulp of hot air. Disappointing, I thought, no harm no foul, though. I procured a liquid breakfast from the fridge, plodded over to the recliner, and clicked on the TV. The day chugged along without incident, same as the day before it, and I was remarkably content given the circumstances. "Yeah, of course Linda, no sweat," I replied. I felt the cold beer drip icy tears over my fingertips. A spastic muscle in my low back groaned, and I shifted my position to accommodate it. A smile very nearly crossed my lips. Then, all at once, my eyes widened. My head shot up like the puck on a carnival game after the lever had been hit with a mallet. I swung around and toppled out of the recliner. Both the chair and I crashed onto the floor. "Who the fuck is there?" I bellowed. My fury echoed through the house, but it received no response. Why would the company do that? Was she some actress? How'd they find someone who looks exactly like Linda? When did it stop? Why didn't I notice? "Alright, that's it," I growled, climbing to my feet. I rushed through the home. Slammed doors into plaster. Flipped over mattresses. Checked each and every room for intruders, rage coursing through my veins, but they were all empty. Eventually, I found myself in front of a drawstring, about to pull down the stairs to the attic. My hand crept into view, but it stopped before reaching the tassel. I brought it closer to my face. Beads of sweat spilled over my temples. I didn't understand. My fingers were covered in Omnigel. My quaking fingertips clasped the string. The stairs descended into place. Each step forward was its own heart attack. I could practically hear clotted arteries clicking against each other in my chest like a handful of seashells, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. My eyes crept over the threshold. I held my breath. No furniture, no intruders, no nothing. Beautifully vacant. The attic stairs weren't built directly into the wall. There was a little space behind me, a small perch, no more than 6 inches wide. I noticed a line of moon-skinned feet in my peripheral vision. There are even a few pairs behind the ones closest to me, too. Maybe I looked up. Maybe I didn't. Part of me thinks I couldn't bear to. The other part of me thinks I've forced myself to forget. I screamed. Leapt down the stairs. Cracked my kneecaps on the floor. The injury didn't hold me back. Not one bit. I took nothing with me as I left. I raced across that faux street, irrationally nervous that I wouldn't find the door and the asphalt would just keep going on forever. It was exactly where I left it. "Don't have a conniption now, old sport," a familiar voice said amidst the cackling. There were 3 men, each with a cigarette dangling between their lips. 2 were dressed like chauffeurs. The third's attire was impeccable and luxurious. The heavier of the 2 chauffeurs doubled over laughing. The executive walked closer and offered me a hand up. "Well, Frederick, the day is today," he exclaimed. "For your wallet's sake, I'd hoped you would last a little longer, but 2.5 hours is still a respectable payday." "No, that's not right," I whispered. He was right. I'd only been in the warehouse for 150 minutes, give or take. I smiled back at him. Linda was thrilled to see the wad of cash I brought home. According to the orthodontist, Bailey will need braces sooner rather than later. I haven't told her about what I experienced. No, I simply told her they awarded me a bonus for my work ethic at the bar. I startled my wife the first time I entered the house through the back door, but I don't plan on entering through the front for a long while. But I think it's just safer not to know, for sure.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
My only prior experience with corpses was an open casket funeral for my grandmother when I was a kid, but the idea of death had never particularly bothered me. It's natural, after all. That said, I admit that I second-guessed my decision as soon as I saw my new seatmate. Mr. Molyneux, rest in peace, sat upright between the window and me, strapped around the waist, with a blue fleece blanket covering his torso and head. The blanket did not cover his hands, which were resting on his lap above his seatbelt, placed that way by a flight attendant as a sign of respect, I assumed. Molyneux's pale fingers were twisted into claws that betrayed the agony of his death. I couldn't look at those hands without imagining what his face looked like under the blanket. I thought of asking for a second blanket, but the flight crew was still busy calming down other passengers and preparing for our U-turn around the Atlantic Ocean. So I tried to forget my uneasiness and closed my eyes, and slept. I woke, hours or minutes later, I don't know, to the jostling of turbulence. The cabin lights were off and most of the passengers around me seemed to be sleeping. I looked out the window, trying not to look at Molyneux as I did so, and saw only the uniform blackness of the night. I imagined the ocean miles below us, lightless and cold. The thought unsettled me and I reached across Molyneux to close the window shade. I lifted the blanket higher. His collar was flecked with dried blood. I remembered his terrible gasping. Finally, I pulled the blanket entirely off, and stifled a scream. Molyneux's head was turned away from me, exactly as if he had turned to stare out the window. I forced myself to look at him again. The jolt must have caused him to pitch forward at the waist, his head colliding with the seat in front of him. I had heard that strange reflexes sometimes kick in after death, limbs flailing, headless chickens running, nerves clearing out the last backlog of instructions from the brain. But the eyes? I had never heard of that. I heard a series of small bangs above my head and felt something wet on my cheek. Every single soda can in the galley had exploded. I climbed into my seat and belted myself in, having briefly forgotten about Molyneux in my terror. Thwack thwack. Again and again, his head hit the window. I began to fear that it was not simply the motion of the plane that compelled him. No one else on the plane was watching this. Some of the passengers had rallied and were trying to pull the injured flight attendants out of the aisle. Others were whispering goodbye messages into their phones. Thwack thwack kar kar. I heard something crack beside me, and hoped desperately that it was Molyneux's skull, and not the window. Outside I could see that the green fog was alive with swirling, amorphous shapes. Thwack krkrr krkum krkum. Cabin breach, said the pilot. Limited backup oxygen, so I'm trying to descend to a safe altitude, but hard to do that in this storm, or whatever it is. God be with us. I pictured those eyes again, which had seen something in the sky that we had not seen, could not see, even as it now threatened to shake the plane apart. There was some connection between these events that I might never understand. But even without understanding, I could make the last move available to me. Whatever you saw out there, I whispered. Whatever you were looking for, go to it and leave us be. The green fog lifted a few minutes later, and the plane descended until it was safe to breathe without the masks. Less than an hour later, I really did see the JFK airstrip. A whole squadron of police and ambulances met us on the way down. The flight attendants and several passengers had to be hospitalized, but as far as I know no one suffered serious injuries. Federal investigators eventually concluded that we had flown through a localized weather anomaly, witnessed by no other plane in the sky that night. Some sort of debris must have been flying around up there with us and taken out the window at 43A, they wrote in their report. This event led to a sudden loss of cabin pressure, in which the body of a passenger who had died earlier in an unrelated medical emergency was ejected from the plane. I expected to hear a lot more about it on the news, but I suppose in the end it was just one of those things. The airline had no interest in publicizing the incident, of course, and the passengers had no desire to relive it.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
My husband is going to replace me, by Historical Run 6809. We met in our senior year of college and married just a year later. It was the perfect love story. Another year after that we bought our first house, and 9 months later came our oldest daughter. A couple years later, the twins came. The past 10 years it has been the 5 of us living what I thought was an idyllic, picture-perfect life. I stayed home with the children, putting my all into raising them. I gave everything, I'm still giving everything, for this family. My babies, they're not to blame. My angels. They have no idea who their father really is. I didn't even know until yesterday. And now I need help, urgently, while I still have a chance. I sat down and opened it. It only said, payment of $30,000 received. Your order has been shipped.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
So, I croaked, ignoring her wince at my raspy voice, you're worried that your dead husband is haunting you when you fuck other men? I inhaled a long drag of the cigarette, then took care to blow the smoke just far enough from her face to avoid being rude. She didn't flinch, which meant she thought I had a lot to offer. Pretty little thing, she was. Nearly 30 years old, though I'd estimate the age of her modified chest to be about 3. Her good look stemmed mainly from the fact that she'd clearly avoided a lifetime of hard work. I probably would have been equally attractive 25 years ago had my twin passions been vanity and stupidity. This gal was taken care of. No, she offered timidly, it's nothing like that. She looked up at me with wide eyes that had been conditioned to elicit sympathy. I noticed. It's just, she bit her lip. It's just that Raymond's been gone a month, but I don't think that he's gone, you know. I want to know if I should put him behind me, or, she shed a tear. It started out small. His favorite sweater would be hanging in the closet, but the next morning, it was lying on the bedroom floor. Not a big deal, you know. She looked around conspiratorially, despite the fact that no one was in the brightly lit sun porch besides the two of us. As if sensing my thought, Sophocles rubbed up against my skirt. I reached down and scratched his ear without turning away from my client. She stared right back at me, looking over the swirling vapor dancing from the teapot spout. But then, she breathed, flushing slightly pink, I would be, in an intimate moment dash. Her pink face quickly turned crimson. The first one. I'd hear a sudden banging on my bedroom door. It would go away whenever I stopped what I was doing. God, her little pauses and cute blushing were irritating. I really wanted to slap her. A long pull of the cigarette really makes people like her worth it. What was her name? Cindy. She seemed like a Cindy. But the Cindys of the world always scatter from my mind for just a few seconds during that first sensual puff. In those moments, I feel so capable. It's Aunt Samantha. I'm sorry. Jilled. Well, how hard are you working? I asked pointedly. She dropped the hand from her face. The breathing is coming from the other side of the room. I gave her an unblinking, fixed stare. She returned it. She took it obediently, blew on it, then took a sip and winced. Too hot? I asked sharply. Too bitter, she responded coolly. Too bad, I finished. Drink the whole cup if you want to see what's on the other side. She sipped as I spoke. You've told me that Raymond's been gone a month. You're broken-hearted, but you can't move on if he's still here. The shock was terrible, wasn't it? A hit and run while he was crossing the street right in front of your own home. The worst moments of your life were sprinting through the house, knowing what was outside before you saw it. The hope was the worst, because you knew that your husband's broken body would be lying in the street. But the smallest part of you hoped that it wasn't true, and that hope made it hurt so much more. You found him in a gory heap just beyond your front yard, and the future you'd imagined drained away like blood through your fingers. And it was in that exact moment, kneeling in the middle of the street at 7:13 p.m., that you realized your life had been permanently changed to a different path of someone else's choosing. I took an aggressive puff of the cigarette and pressed forward. The sun set while you held his already cooling hand, and you realized that this would be the first sunset you'd spend knowing he was dead, and that you would end every day with this thought on your mind from now on. She blanched. I never told you that it was at sunset. I never even said it was a car accident. Her cup of tea was empty. I blew one last long stream of smoke from the cigarette. If I were in your shoes, sweetie, I'd be much more worried about how much poisonous oleander you just had with your tea. He stared at his young widow. Or, I should say, the one eye that hadn't popped to jelly was staring. Instead, she focused on me. How long, when will it start? She asked in utter petrification. Raymond grunted. He wasn't much for talking, what with the lolling tongue dangling impotently where his missing jaw should have been. The convulsing started then, but it didn't stop for a long time. Do you have any idea how far mouth foam can spray when a dying woman just won't stop thrashing? That's a really fucking difficult task, though, when your throat is closing up. Ahem. He glanced up at me with his lone functioning eye. It was damp. I do appreciate your clear instructions on how to locate the briefcase. If everything is as promised, the bill will be settled. He grunted and waved his limp, floppy arm at the body of his dead wife. He shook more eagerly, spraying a fine mist of ghost blood onto the woman's purple face. I bent down and pried a ring from the woman's rubbery hand. "Yes, thank you very much, I do accept tips for a job well done, you gentlemen, you." This time I know Raymond was smiling. And I was, too. "My name is Patricia Barnes, and I'm a hitman for ghosts that only I can see. BD." What happened next?
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
I'm not sleeping tonight. No way. She's in her room right now. Door wide open. Sitting on the edge of her bed. Staring at the wall. Not moving. Not blinking. I should explain. Or maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. My daughter, her name is Mia. She's 8. At least, she was. I called her name last night. Mia, just like always. I wasn't even thinking. And, it wasn't a human smile. It wasn't hers. It looked like someone who had seen a smile once and was trying to recreate it using the wrong muscles. Like the idea of smiling was floating somewhere behind her eyes, but nothing connected right. Now she just sits. Or stands outside in the rain and doesn't blink. She looked up at me, face soaked, hair plastered to her forehead, and said, "Because I don't get cold anymore." I tried to laugh. "Oh yeah? Since when?" She didn't laugh. Didn't even smile that time. She just said, "Since I stopped being her." It's the little shit that eats away at you. She doesn't blink unless she remembers to. She eats, but only if I put the food in front of her. She walks too lightly, like her feet aren't quite touching the ground. Sometimes she calls me Dad. Sometimes she says him. Once, she called me host. I didn't want the answer. 3 nights ago, I woke up and she was standing next to my bed. I didn't hear her walk in. The floor didn't creak. She was just there. Her face maybe a foot away from mine, eyes wide open. Too wide. They were black. No whites. No pupils. Just bottomless black. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't react. She just said, "You shouldn't have buried her so deep." I told myself I didn't know what that meant. But I did. I don't want to write this part. I don't. But it won't stop clawing at the back of my skull. I wake up with blood in my mouth from grinding my teeth. Last summer, Mia went missing for 4 hours. She was gone. Not a sound. Not a scream. Just, gone. They checked her. Not a scratch. No bruises. Just wet. They told me kids wander. Do we still have ice cream at home? Like nothing happened. Now. I don't think what walked out of the trees that day was her. I think I know what I did. I just can't say it. Not yet. I played her favorite song once. The one she used to dance to as a baby. Itsy Bitsy Spider. I did the hand motions. just to see if she remembered. And then she whispered, "He's not in the drain anymore." I asked her what that meant. Necks twisted. Head tilted like a dog that hears something high-pitched. Waiting. For what? I can't sleep. I won't. She doesn't want to pretend anymore. She knows I remember. Just know I didn't hurt her. Not anymore. I think maybe I put her there.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
It caught my eye. It was a simple shot of her face, so near to the camera that I could count the freckles. Her teeth a little too large for her mouth and her nose ever so slightly crooked. I've never been the type of guy to consider yoga, but I tuned in, and in a matter of seconds, I was entranced. The girl was in her living room, a haphazard mise-en scene, the floor speckled with sad little plants and stacks of magazines. She posed with her hands on the floor and her hips thrust in the air. Her butt perched in the center of the screen. I decided to stay a while. And I fell into the meditative quagmire woven by her words, inhaling the scent of my own socks, failing to notice she'd moved into a different pose. Subscribers, 1. That was me. I was the only one watching. I felt an inexplicable flood of guilt when I closed the browser, like I was abandoning her. I checked back into her channel the next few afternoons. It was the strangest thing. She was always streaming. She was either unaware of my presence or apathetic to it. Her ramblings, so freewheeling that they approached random word association, didn't seem to change whether I was there or not. She was often mid-sentence when I logged in. She was flirty in a way that made it clear she wasn't trying to be, charmingly raw in her tendency to fumble instructions. Curiosity overwhelmed me. I yearned to discover more about this fascinating creature. Her movements drew me in, like she was grasping at me through the screen. I marveled at the feeling of being her silent voyeur. I developed more comfort with the basic poses, though I still couldn't get my hands anywhere near my toes. Too soon, she notched up the level of difficulty. She eased herself into the splits. Each leg outstretched, her toes pointed at perfect right angles. I tried my best to replicate the pose, my groin protesting the pressure. Each day, she pushed a little farther. She curved her spine sharply behind her, a graceful arc. She lifted her back leg high into the air at an angle that seemed to wrench her hip out of place. I forced my body into the closest approximations of her geometry that my tendons would allow, my teeth gritted against the sharp warnings issued by my nerves. At night I dreamed that she was breaking my joints, cracking my limbs into the clean shapes that she maintained so effortlessly. One day she twisted her arms so far behind her that I felt sympathetic pain, and folded herself up so that her bent legs swooped around her shoulders, touching her toes behind her neck. She smiled at the camera, demurely, politely. "You want to see me bend into a pretzel, don't you?" she asked. That was the first time she addressed me. I would forget to eat. I'd wake up on the couch, having dozed off, and she would be murmuring about pomegranates while her forehead brushed her knees. Did she sleep? Did she eat? I saw no evidence of it. Every time I moved, my body ached with the memory of being stretched to its limit. I was spending 10, 12, 14 hours a day on her stream. She spoke to me frequently. "I know you've been watching me. I think you like watching me. How far do you want me to twist for you?" The fluid shifting of her body into vertices and curves and delicate polygons was hypnotizing. I was getting lost in the light of a flickering flame as it swirled into different patterns. I was working myself into something more pliable, molding myself into something like her image. It's difficult to pinpoint the moment she went too far. It was more like the creep of quicksand than any one single point. She would lie on her back and lift herself on the palms and soles of her feet, her torso thrusting at the ceiling like she was something from The Exorcist. She would inch her hands and feet closer together, folding her body backwards on itself until she was nearly split in half. And then she would skitter forward until the whites of her eyes flooded the screen, scaring me so much that I jumped. And she would laugh, as if she had made a joke. She said, "You like this, don't you, Mr. Smith? Am I your foldable pocket toy?" I tried to resume normal life. But I had almost nothing to fill my time except television and social media and filling out applications for jobs I'd never want to work. A strange sensation tickled at me, like something was wrong, like I was forgetting something. And powerful waves of guilt, the same guilt I'd felt when I closed her stream the first day I'd found her. Feeling sick, I closed the stream. I had spent countless hours thinking about her, wondering what she was doing, whether she was still telling stories to her invisible visitor. I logged in. Her eyes filled the webcam's field of vision, so suddenly that I scrambled backwards. And that sound, echoing around the walls of her apartment and mine, and it was now clear that it was a sound of misery. Her arms were folded behind her head and her other leg was tucked under the first. She was struggling, and I realized that she was stuck. I stared slack-jawed at the screen, and her eyes met mine, seeming to blink in recognition. The force of her sobs crescendoed. In relief? I wasn't sure. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know her name or where she lived, I didn't even know for sure that she was in the same country. I sat, frozen, for long moments, watching the twitching of her limbs as she tried to wrench herself out of the cage her body made. Then it struck me, I could type. "Can you type your address?" The message pinged its arrival at her computer. Our first real communication. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, with the slight range of motion her position allowed. Her eyes flickered across the page as she read my words. With great effort she rocked herself over, landing face first on the keyboard. "Siviosh Gusso," she typed. I watched as she managed to prop herself precariously on one shoulder. Her body was convulsing with the force of her sobs. Eventually, she leaned forward, carefully, delicately, and pressed the tip of her nose to the keys. 3. She had cobbled together a number and a street. It had taken us nearly an hour to get to this point. She had just finished typing apartment 12 when she stopped, trembling with the effort of keeping herself upright, and we met eyes again through the camera, hers shining with pain and fear. And then she collapsed. She rolled out of sight. Panicking, I sent her dozens of frantic messages. What city? What state? Stay with me. I'm here. Where are you? I need more. I'm here with you. You'll be safe. This will be over soon. The ringing of the phone nearly sent me out of my skin. It was 1 a.m. Did you find her? I asked desperately, scanning the scene for any sign of activity. Tell me she's all right. The voice on the other end of the line sighed, a deep sigh, of sadness or frustration I couldn't say. We found her, he said, his words gentle but guarded. Stuck in that position, as you described. She's not okay. She died of dehydration. I don't know what you saw, son. I truly don't. But the girl we found has been dead for a month. 10.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock, knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine. Stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
Last year I moved to a new town and knew no one. I tried going for drinks with coworkers, meeting girls on dating apps, even going by myself to the farmer's market. It never worked out though, and after months of trying to make friends or find a girlfriend, I gave up. I just didn't click with anyone. That's when I realized I just needed to find a solo hobby. And that's when I started hiking on the weekends. It was great at first. I was accepting life as an introvert, getting in tune with my feelings, reconnecting with nature, all that bullshit. Really, it just made me feel better about myself to be doing something I could call healthy and productive instead of sitting alone in my apartment. After a few months I had even built up some endurance and invested in a pair of quality hiking boots. I was able to do the relatively easy 3-mile trail closest to me in under an hour. I started looking for harder trails, figuring I needed more of a challenge. I guess I got what I wanted. I finally found a trail about 20 minutes from me, promising a rugged 10-mile loop around a lake. Perfect. The first time I went I was ready to give up hiking. I had gotten bored halfway through and it stopped being fun. The next weekend it was either go or sit alone, so I downloaded a podcast to listen to as I walked. What a game changer. The time flew by and I was mad at myself for not thinking of it sooner. Another month went by and I had been listening to the same podcast every weekend on that trail. I knew it pretty well by now, occasionally venturing off the path to explore, but I didn't want to move on to a new place. It was actually very pretty, late fall at this point, and it felt familiar. I felt comfortable there. This last time though, earlier today. I think that really will be my last hike. The air was crisp, a slight chill to it, so I put on my blue jacket and set off down the trail. I pulled up this week's episode one had downloaded last night as I walked. Pressed play, earbuds in, deep breath as I slipped the phone into my inner pocket. I readjusted my backpack, a small thing with some first aid stuff, water, and snacks, as the hosts began. All of this, before everything, I can remember so vividly. But then it gets a bit hazy. I know it happened. I know it had to have been real. But it's all so impossible. Since I thankfully downloaded the episode, I can maybe try and figure out how to upload it and let you listen for yourselves, because I know no one would ever believe me otherwise. I can't find the episode online anywhere. It's like it has been erased and I feel crazy. But I know it was real. The hosts, Isaac and Archer, began with some introductions and the premise of today's story. Usually they would just read a scary fictional story and throw in their opinions on it. Today apparently they would be discussing a real true crime story. I wouldn't call myself a true crime listener, but I liked these guys and figured it would be interesting if they wanted to talk about it. I could listen to them read off their grocery lists and be content. Yes, today they would be talking about a hiker found dead on a trail. I smiled at that, amused. I thought this was the perfect time for this and would make it atmospheric. I continued walking and zoned out as I listened, focusing on the dirt path and lowering my head. There are a few paths that break off the main one, and as I came up on the first one, I decided to take the left one today. I was pretty sure this one dipped down closer to the lake and would make for a nice change. As I got a few yards out they finally got to describing the details of the case. A person, unidentifiable, burned to a crisp apparently, was found on the shore of a lake. I looked up and could see the start of the water about a mile ahead of me. One of them, Archer, interjected and guessed that you'd have to be pretty unlucky to burn right next to water. The other, Isaac, scolded him for being so callous and pointed out they need to show some respect. I agreed, there was usually something morbid about the true crime storytellers. Isaac added that most likely the body was moved there anyways, as police had found a blue jacket and one hiking boot further up the trail. This caused me to stumble and I almost fell but caught myself. This was making it a little too immersive. I pulled out my phone to hit pause, deciding the sounds of nature were what I needed. I heard a branch snap behind me as the sound of a branch snapping played through my headphones. My breath caught and I froze. Slowly I looked over my shoulder, my neck the only part of me able to move. But there was nothing I could see. I stared off into the trees as the hosts continued talking. I've been home a few hours now and the feeling of being watched has returned. I can't rationalize it anymore. Re-listening to the audio, they had to have been talking about me. Everything was so specific. I keep thinking I smell smoke, too. I feel like I'm losing it.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I call him Bob, and I think he can see us, by Nunaret These. I only call him Bob because giving him a name feels safer. But nothing about him is safe. He sees everything. I don't know what he is. A presence, maybe. A watcher. But he's real. I've seen what happens when he looks at people too long. It started as a joke. Bob can see us, I used to say when someone did something shady. But I wasn't really joking. Not deep down. Because after a while, I started seeing things, moments that didn't involve me but felt, shown to me. I don't know how to explain it. It's like Bob wanted me to know. All but the mouth, Antonio smirked. My blood turned to ice. Bob's here, he muttered. Ray stopped smiling. I swear he looked right at me through the screen. Then she went quiet. Ames. I'll skip this one, she said softly. Bob's here. And then I started feeling him in my own life. When I almost took cash from my roommate's drawer. When I typed a lie into a job application. When I watched something I shouldn't. Always, I'd pause. My chest would tighten. Like something was standing just behind me. Bob doesn't punish. Not directly. He just sees. That's enough. The people who feel him, really feel him, always stop before they go too far. The others? I don't think they get a second chance. And if you're reading this, he sees you, too.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Because You Are My Baby, by Dopamine. Because you are my baby, she whispered in her low, wet voice. She stroked my face with long fingers. Her teeth glittered under the stars, rich and pale as polished ivory. My baby will never hear, or see, or know the cruelties that haunt me. Cruelty was not the only thing my mother knew that I did not, although it was the only thing she refused to teach me. My mother tried very hard to teach me everything else she knew. Unfortunately, I was a very poor pupil indeed. But I could not hunt. Not like her. My small, soft fingers were no match for her lethal claws. My clumsy little body, somehow so susceptible to both the heat and the cold, trailed after her whip-like predator's form. Mother caught deer and foxes with her beautiful teeth, striking from the shadows like a snake. By contrast, my dull teeth could not even crush rabbit bones. I persevered, but did not improve. One night, while Mother snaked through the shadows, communing with trees and evading the dark things prowling the night, I curled up and wept. Mother stood there for a long while. Then she crept forward and covered me with fresh leaves before lying beside me. I will feed you, always, she whispered. Because you are my baby. In addition to hunting, my mother was a phenomenal creator of shelters. Sometimes she lived within the earth, snaking through loam and tree roots like treasure-hoarding dragons of old. Sometimes she lived in the trees. Many nights I watched in awe as her bones elongated and tore through her rough skin, stretching upward to twist among the branches like an ancient spider god. I would wait patiently, sometimes for hours, as Mother communed with the spirits buried in the roots. So Mother tried to teach me to live in the shadows. But the darkness terrified me. Every night, I hid and wept, imagining the legs of centipedes crawling across my skin. All the night creatures reveled in my fear, owls swooped down to taunt me and bats torpedoed toward me, giggling in their shrill, squeaking voices until Mother slapped them out of the sky. Finally Mother realized the futility of these lessons. So she dug a deep burrow just for me. She lined it with leaves and slurped the worms and roaches from the walls. When she finished, I burst into tears. As I grew older, I developed rudimentary survival skills. I shied away from hunting big game, elk and deer, bears and boar, because I did not protect the forest. I gave it nothing, I only took, so I took as little as I could. I trapped rabbits, fished the streams, and ate wild berries. I dared take nothing else. I confronted her about it one balmy spring evening. "You leave me more and more," I accused. "Soon you'll leave me forever." "But you do," I screamed. "You already do." "I did," she said. "So I will never leave you. When you think I've left, silence yourself and listen. Listen for me the way I listen for the trees, the animals, and the stars. If you are silent and you are sincere, you will hear me." And then she left. Fury and jealousy seared my heart like a wildfire. She insulted me, she humiliated me, and after all that she left me. Left me for the centipedes and the wolves and the stupid, chittering bats. Then I ran for my burrow. As the earthen door materialized before me, nodding with flowers and wild grasses, anger swelled inside me. It possessed me, this wild ball of misery born of my own endless fear and inadequacy. And it spoke to me. "Why should you return to the burrow?" it asked. Why indeed? It wasn't mine. It was Mother's. The entire forest belonged to Mother. Without her, the forest would have consumed me long ago. So I turned away from the burrow and kept running. I will find the end of the forest, I decided. I will leave it once and for all. I ran for days, in the process treating the forest with contempt. I stripped the trees of their leaves to make nightly beds. I threw rocks at birds and rabbits. I uprooted bushes and stripped entire groves of their berries, eating until I threw up from sheer excess. Then I ate again. Not out of hunger, not out of any need, but out of malice. I froze immediately. The only voice I knew was Mother's, wet and low, an earthy, rib-shaking whisper. These voices were nothing like Mother's. They were high and somehow infantile, with strange, shrill notes. Trembling, I dropped low and crept through the underbrush. Sun-warmed leaves brushed against my face, smooth but painfully crisp. The sun was taking its toll on them. I snaked over the ground, pretending I was Mother, slipping through the forest like an invisible snake. I reached a break in the trees and peered through. I touched my face, flat and smooth, and looked down at myself, mud-streaked, deeply tanned, and marked with a hideous mass of scars, but still soft. Hairless, small, weak. There was no mistaking it. These things in the woods, these overdressed, half-formed beings with small teeth and no claws and overlarge eyes, were like me. She did not. So I turned and ran. The forest seemed to punish me for my earlier cruelty. Brambles scratched my legs. Stones cut my feet. Branches swiped at my face, leaving deep, stinging runnels. I thanked the forest for its kindness. I thanked it for punishing me, rather than stopping me. The men gasped and wailed amongst themselves. What the hell is it? I don't know. I don't know. Is it a kid? Look at its face. Look at its fucking face. That isn't a kid. And then Mother came, erupting from the trees like a great beast of old. But that's what she was, after all. A great beast, surely a demon of the ancient world. She pounced upon the men, batting them the way a house cat bats its toys. She clamped one between her claws, squeezing until his head separated and went rolling across the ground. Mother dug her claws into the skull of the last survivor and cracked it open like a fruit. Blood and gray brain glistened in the sunlight. The man screamed, and screamed, and screamed. Terror paralyzed me. I looked helplessly at her, blazing eyes, contorted face runneled with earth and wildflowers, sun-bleached bone and pale, spongy rot. My mother, my beautiful demon mother who claimed me out of revenge and raised me out of obligation, staring at me like I was a man. When you stone a bird, my heart stops. When you break a branch, my bones snap. When you selfishly strip the shrubs of their fruit, of their very birthright, my skin blisters. When you hurt the forest, she roared, my heart bleeds. She dropped me. I hit the ground with such force it knocked the wind out of me. Mother pulled back and busied herself with one of the corpses. I looked up, shaking. Birds watched from the trees, quick and curious and full of condemnation. I averted my eyes as tears spilled. "For eyes," she said. "One from each man. And the heart of the one that shot you. Eat." My lip quivered. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gore in my mother's hand. A heart and eyes. Raw and plump, alive just minutes ago. "Mother," I said. "Please." Then I raised it to my lips and bit in. I blinked tiredly. "Why?" "Men," she said. A lump rose in my throat. Shame like I'd never known enveloped me. "I'm so sorry." Mother closed her eyes. For a long time, she did not speak. Then she drew a deep breath. "I took you from a cruel man. Listen. I will tell you now of the cruelties I endured. Mother was once a young, beautiful human woman. Surely not more beautiful than you are now, I objected. Mother was alone in the world. She had no family or friends. She once had a family, but they harmed her greatly, so she ran away. She lived in the forest, in a small, ragged tent. She ate wild berries, fished the lake, and boiled water to drink. No sooner had Mother gathered her meager belongings and exited the jail than a guard came up beside her. "Where are you headed to?" he asked. "I'll take you wherever you want to go." And he put a baby in her. Mother was so broken that he missed all signs of impending childbirth. When I came, Mother died. I do not understand what Mother said next, it is difficult to translate. But the closest I can come is this. Everyone sings a song to those they love. Most aren't able to hear these songs. If you can't hear, it can't help you. But if you can hear it, a song is the most powerful thing in the world. It kills. It calls. It consumes. It destroys. It strengthens. When I reformed and breathed again, I stole you from your father, Mother said. Then I brought you here, because you are my baby. I wept silently, because I didn't know what to say. Then she whipped around, like a wolf, a snake, and hawk combined, and left. But summer slowly bled into fall, and still mother did not return. When the first snow came, dry and cold, skittering across the landscape like powder, I knew something was wrong. The snows deepened. The forest drifted into its winter sleep, cloaked in ice and fog. Every night, I made myself silent. I mustered all the sincerity I could. And I listened for my mother's voice. It didn't come. I grew thin and sick. My skin burned even as I shivered. My chest grew congested, my throat so sore I couldn't sleep. My breath came in sharp, pained wheezes. Soon I became too weak to leave the burrow. I crawled to the doorway and ate snow. For sustenance, I slurped worms from the earthen walls. I heard her in my dreams, the low, rushing voice like music made into water. "I am coming," she said. "I am coming, because you are my baby." I smiled, and slept. Next thing I knew, I was cold. Cold and wet and shivering, but awake that I shot up and screamed as my skin brushed the thick, flower-matted hide of my mother. I spun around, smiling, and froze. Mother lay beside me, panting. Blood seeped from 100 wounds, crusting her hair. The exposed bones in her face were crushed and concave, leaking gore and blood. Without opening her eyes, she smiled. "I heard you. I heard your song." Tears blurred my vision. My chest began to hitch. I couldn't draw breath, it was like I was sick again, drowning in pus and trapped fluid. Only I wasn't dying this time. My mother was. "No," she said. "You needed to see me again. But you do not need me." Since my real mother apparently died long ago, they decided that mother, whoever she was nothing but a crazy, homeless child abuser. But I know better. I am growing my mother's beautiful teeth. And she tells me she is waiting for me, because I am her baby.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
We set out yesterday from Gainesville, Florida, where Lauren had recently graduated from law school. We were moving to my home state of Maine, to start a permanent life together. The drive was beautiful most of the way, and Lauren and I spent a lot of time on speaker phone with each other to comment on it. A couple of times we passed through rain, and once a really wild thunderstorm that lit up the whole sky for miles. Then, about 8 hours ago, we hit a traffic jam on I-95 just outside of Lewiston, Maine. I took a look at the navigation thing on my phone, but it didn't show any red areas of heavy delay. It also had some trouble showing my exact location, though, so I lit a cigarette and figured it would just be a few minutes. After about 15 minutes, I called Lauren. "How's it going back there?" I asked. In the background, I could hear the cats going nuts. "Love you," said Lauren. I hung up and tried to get something on the radio. I have a base model 2006 Toyota Tundra, so no AUX jack, and the CD player had broken years ago. During the entire trip, I had been at the mercy of radio stations, and for the most part, they didn't do much for me other than create a general atmosphere of annoyance. Now, though, I couldn't even keep the radio on. What wasn't warbling static was some kind of distorted robotic voice reading off a list of numbers and random words strung together. Across the whole radio band, same thing. I couldn't take it, so I shut it off. When I was halfway there, a voice cut into the air. It sounded like someone shouting through a bullhorn. "Return immediately to your vehicles. No one is permitted to be outside. This is your only warning. If you do not heed it, there will be severe consequences." I tried calling Lauren again. When she answered, all that I could hear were broken flashes of the cat screaming and Lauren sounding scared and begging to know what was happening. The EMTs dragged the guy with the Boston accent by the arms over to the ambulance. They opened the doors and sort of tossed him in, and then followed behind. I saw the riot gear person again for a second, and then the doors slammed shut and the ambulance sped off down the shoulder out of sight. I could even hear the cats. They sounded really freaked out. I don't know, baby. I think we're in some kind of military lockdown maybe. I think we have to just sit tight here. Can you throw me a bottle? Asked Lauren. Not something I want to shout out for the whole world to hear, said Lauren. Let's just say we've been here a while and I don't think we're coming to a rest stop soon enough. Finally, I understood. I reached over and grabbed a bottle. I chucked it out the window, but it was a bad throw, and bounced off the hood of Lauren's Honda. I tried again, and this time she caught it. She rolled up her window and in the rearview mirror I watched her fuss around as she presumably tried to pee into the thing. This was when the fleet of massive trucks started rolling in, on the southbound side of the highway divide. Some of them had cranes sitting on long flat beds, and others had big chunks of some kind of metal material. Soon, the southbound side was jammed up with these giant trucks and their hull. Then they started to get to work. What are they doing? Asked Lauren. She'd opened her window back up. Are they building a fucking wall? A lady answered. What is the address for this emergency? I-95 northbound, just before Lewiston, Maine. I forget the exit number we were coming up on. I'm sorry. Sir, I am going to need you to remain calm and stay in your vehicle. And if you would, roll down your window. Not the driver's side, the passenger's side. What? I asked. Then I heard the tapping at my window. There was a lady cop standing there, holding a cell phone up to her ear. My heart jumped up into my throat, and my instinct was to slam my foot on the gas pedal, but there was nowhere to go. I rolled down the window. You reported an emergency? Asked the cop. Everything looks okay to me. We don't discourage anyone from calling emergency services if they truly think that there might be an emergency situation occurring, but everything appears to be perfectly fine here. I will give you the benefit of the doubt this time, but remember that we also very strongly frown upon fraudulent 911 calls. You could be charged for that, sir. It's no joke. It's no problem at all, sir, said the cop, smiling. And remember, stay in your vehicle. Of course, I said, trying to smile, though I'm sure my face looked like a sweaty pretzel instead. The cop nodded and then walked off down the line of cars. I waited a few minutes, and then called out to Lauren. I think we're fucked. I said. I called 911 and that cop that was just here. She's the one who picked up. She said everything's fine, but it's not. Fuck, said Lauren. What do we do? That's when the guy jumped out of his car and made a break for the wooded area to the right of the highway. And that's when they shot him in the legs. I heard him cry out and watched him hit the ground. I heard a loud continuous rumble, interspersed with snaps from the woods. Then I saw the tank. It didn't so much emerge from the woods as it destroyed the woods in its wake. Beyond it, I saw another enormous wall. We were walled in from two sides, and my guess was that we were walled in from four sides. They're almost at my truck now. I hope they skip me, and Lauren. Oh God. I'm going to tell her that I love her. And number X200B. Part 2.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
The House at the End of Our Street, by OK, film, 1502. There were never any construction crews before it appeared. Nothing to indicate that people had worked on it or that it was planned. Where there once been a lot, there was now a house. But this house was not like the ones that surrounded it. Our street was not a place where the populace thrived and extravagance ran through. We were modest in our living quarters, our one-story homes more than sufficed. But this house towered over us, casting a shadow over our sleepy town. Its design imitated a mansion more than presented as one. Staring at the windows only revealed them to be glass panes attached to the brick wall, with no way to look inside. The side door was attached to what was supposed to be a chimney, causing fire to jump out whenever it opened. Catching the garage door opening revealed it to open sideways, much like the front. The more you stared, the more nonsensical the building became. Our cul-de-sac was tight-knit, but welcoming. Our neighbors were the first to attempt to welcome these new guests. They had stopped by our house before walking over. My memories of 30 years ago failed to recall specifics, but they invited my parents to their surprise housewarming. My parents denied. Our neighbors then left to go to the house at the end. They never came back. What can I say of those occupants? My parents never wanted me to come close to them, for like the houses they inhabited, they seemed like imitation rather than flesh. Their white teeth always shone in a smile that was just wide enough to cross over from friendly to creepy. Their skin, it crossed the barrier of what could be considered pale into almost ghost white. Other times, they would just stand and stare. Sometimes, I felt that they were staring at me. My parents forbid me from going anywhere near that house, which after a while soon became houses. I heeded their demands not out of obedience to them, but out of fear for my own safety. And although many neighbors and friends went towards that house, getting replaced not soon after, we stood our ground. My mother was the only opposition on the council to this change, but was quickly outvoted by the other members of the council. I sat in one of those meetings once, when my father was busy and couldn't look after me. I saw he scream on deaf ears and cry out every word of her plea, but everything she did was dismissed in a monotone voice. I caught for a glimpse what the mayor and council were paying for. As Mom stormed out of the hall, the members gathered in a meeting room next to the main entrance. My eyes caught what I assume now to be the budget chart of the city, and taking up what I believe to have been almost 70% of it, was just something called House. The council disbanded soon after. Although the vote was not unanimous, the other members just never showed back up to meetings, leaving my mother to have to deal with everything alone. Soon, however, the mayor personally showed up to fire her. This had also made me an outcast, as my former friends turned on me for not bowing down to these new invaders. They called me names and pushed me around while they got showered in riches and the latest toys, accessories, and other forms of opulence. All the while, they were oblivious to their own transformation. I've had a normal life from that point onwards. I've started a family, made friends, and found a career in history, a passion of mine. For now, I've been able to have a pretty normal life. I have only been back to my childhood town once, though, and with my hindsight, I realized that was a grave mistake. I knew I really shouldn't have tried to go further, but I didn't want my parents to be left alone in that hell. Going in, I saw what my mother was talking about. The houses looked like what you'd think a child would design after asking about his dream home. Everyone was taller, with rooms sticking out of each other and even being diagonal at some points. Everyone was outside, staring at me that same way just like when I left. I ignored them, my parents were my top priority after all. Coming to my cul-de-sac, I saw something I had only ever read about in science fiction before. It was completely covered in those tendrils, not an inch of the house even showed. I tried calling my parents, maybe they had gotten out before whatever had happened. My hope, fading with each ring, eventually died out when I saw the tendrils start to contract. This thing had trapped my parents inside and now it was slowly suffocating them. There was no doubts about it now. I know others that would have been braver and tried to ram into these tendrils to save their loved ones. Unfortunately, I am not one of them. I drove away like a coward right then and there. I let my parents die, without a fight. After the service, I started up a habit of driving around the whole town now. My wife thinks I'm getting paranoid, but I know what I saw, and I know what happens if you don't get away fast enough. I don't know if whatever that house is has started to spread, but the first time I see one of those monstrosities enter my town, I am protecting my family and moving as far away as we can. They had the same exact faces as my mother and father. And they were looking right at the camera.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Narrations. Mr. Creeps. To all the people who keep demanding me ID the story is true, please see the description and nature of the subreddit where it is posted. And number X200B. What do you think it is? Alex asked. I don't know, looks like some kind of bunker, I replied. And it looks like it has been closed for some time, I added after taking a closer look at the doors. The both halves were welded shut in the center. Alex took his samples and readings, but we were too puzzled to leave just yet. It looks like an underground bunker. They must have had a way to pump air inside and I don't think this is it. There has to be another way to get in. I said. We circled the main entrance to try find other means of entry. The day was already coming to an end and it was slowly getting darker. As we were searching, a thought crossed my mind. Look, there's something there, Alex pulled me away from my thoughts. Should I open it? I asked. You've got to be kidding me. This is so cool. We have to come back here and check it out later. Alex said. And number X200B. And number X200B. And number X200B. Floor -1, offices, security and recreation. The map was titled Object 13. It wasn't a military bunker. This was a research site. And number X200B. We took a set of stairs, since the elevators were of no use without power. An unsettling thought brushed my mind as we were descending. They probably were moving some supplies, and then left them there and took the equipment to the main door. Were they trying to get out? I stepped on another stair step but something rolled away under my foot, lost my balance and fell on my back. My pack luckily absorbed the impact. I looked under my feet to see what caused my fall. Empty bullet casings. This wasn't the sole reason why I felt odd about this place. As soon as we got down to level -1, I noticed that every single door was open. Every single one. There was a canteen and a kitchen right at the beginning of a long rectangular corridor. Various offices surrounded the corridor. There was the regular stuff, paperwork, old computers, personal belongings, all right there where they left it. Did they leave in a hurry? Dimitri. Alex called from the canteen on the opposite side of the corridor. There was food still neatly served on the tables. But it wasn't spoilt. It wasn't fresh either, but it wasn't decaying, as a 30-year-old meal should. How is this possible? I asked. I don't know, maybe it was irradiated or something. But it's not anymore, I checked that. I really don't know man, he answered, as puzzled as I was. Almost at the other side of the floor, we found the head scientist's office. As I said, everywhere it was a mess, but I found a logbook on the desk. There was only a handful of pages, the rest torn out. And number X200B. 17, January 1985, we've managed to transport an apple today. However, I couldn't help but notice that the pattern of red and green skin on top was slightly different. But it was still the same apple, with the same structure, shape, everything. We also tried to transport some electronics. They were unharmed and in working order. I think that we still have a lot to perfect and learn about this technology, but we cannot slow down now. The country is relying on us. 21, February 1985, after the animal trials, we translocated our first human today. He is alive and healthy, a brave hero of our nation. We have proven that this technology works now, but the practicality is still very limited due to the fixed translocation ratio. We still cannot send matter. Only exchange the positions of two equally massive objects. I have proposed a new type of device that could possibly achieve one-way translocation of just a single object, but it would need an immense amount of energy. 1, May 1985, our superiors accepted my proposal. They are going to build a new, much bigger translocator here, in the power plant, so we can use a nuclear reactor as a direct power source. There is one more thing. We've now translocated dozens of test subjects. Each one is alive and well, but sometimes they are a little bit, well, different. They sometimes claim that various events in the past happened differently than they really did. Sometimes they claim to know people who don't exist, or more alarming, they know people who they are not supposed to know. The following was written below with a pencil by hand. Test subject 28 was speaking an unknown language and couldn't understand any real language after the experiment. There was one last page in the logbook. On it, it was just a single phrase, written again and again. Number, we let them in. And number X200B. There were clothes all over the corridor. Well, what was left of them? They were torn to shreds. No bodies, no blood, just strips of cloth and an occasional shoe or a watch. I looked up and stared down the dark corridor in front of us. I just stood there for a while. And number X200B. It was, I don't know, as if something torn all these people to shreds, and then cleaned it all up. Except the clothes and other non-organic material. And number X200B. Let's just get out of here. Alex said. We turned around and walked away. Slowly at first, but we quickened our pace. Our footsteps echoed across the underground structure. My thoughts were cut short after a sudden realization. His voice didn't echo. It was just our footsteps. I stepped forward. Clack. I took another step. Clack. I took a step forward. The glass shattered. We dropped all our gear except our lights and ran as fast as we could. I didn't even know I could run this fast. I always tried to be a tough guy, but I was never so scared in my life. Our footsteps didn't echo anymore. Or better said, they weren't in sync with ours anymore. Something was running after us. Each second it was getting closer. And closer. The door slammed shut and I threw the wheel to the blocked position. My heart was pounding so hard that it was all I heard for a while. And number X200B. Oh fuck. But we forgot the vents. And number X200B. I feel terrible for doing this, but I just ran. I climbed the service shaft and locked the service door shut when I was finally out of this hell. As soon as I had phone service again, my phone started beeping with loads and loads of missed calls and messages from Pavel. This guy is calling me now, he sounds serious, please call me back at once. Dmitry, this is Anatoly Moros, I know what you found and I'm on my way from Kiev now. Do not go down there. If you already did and you managed to get out, lock the door that you used to get in and make sure it stays locked. I will try to call you when I'm here. And number X200B. I just can't leave Alex behind. And number X200B.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
Part 1. I thought about the camera above me and took my hand away from my face. I rolled back to the desk and sat there, trying to stop from shaking, trying to make myself take a breath. Think about it slow. The first thing was, should I hit a button? I looked back at the monitor for the first time since reading the words. Rachel was already moving the paintings back off the sofa, as though she knew the message had been received. A canvas in each hand, she glanced up at the camera as she moved across the room, and it felt like she was looking right at me. My chest tightened as my hands moved away from the buttons. The only people I had actually met connected to this job were a couple of people when I filled out the papers and then Mr. Solomon when he showed me the model room and told me the job. I had no way of contacting any of them except through the buttons. My checks were deposited electronically and I had never run into anyone else who worked at the surveillance room. I was tired and the street was pretty empty and boring, but I was too excited and scared to fall asleep. Every time a car passed or someone walked down the sidewalk, I tensed. I kept imagining a SUV or van pulling up behind me. Men getting out and pulling me from my car, taking me somewhere like where they had Rachel to kill or torture me. Half a dozen times I almost cranked up and drove away, but every time I would think of her alone in that room. She had no one but me to help her, and I had to try. He yanked at the door again, but I was still holding it, and I was stronger than he was. After a second, weaker tug, he turned around, his face strained and tired looking. Yeah, I know who you are. You work here just like me. And I'm telling you, we aren't supposed to be talking. We aren't supposed to meet, ever. I frowned. Mr. Solomon never told me that. He never said it was one of the rules. I felt my stomach curling into a cold knot. Too late. The man rubbed his face. Kid, do you think they don't know we're talking? Do you think anything happens that they don't know about? He looked back toward the building, a look of sadness and fear in his eyes. Hell, for all I know, you've already killed us both. Shaking his head, he pushed me back and started opening the door. Either way, I'm done risking it. You need to stop asking questions and just do your job. It's a lot healthier. As I parked my car and walked into my apartment building, I made a decision. Unless I thought of something better overnight, I would do both ideas. Tomorrow I would break the rule about carrying anything in. I'd use my phone to record a video of the surveillance room, of Rachel and how she was trapped somewhere, and of me telling everything else I knew. And I would email it to every newspaper, website, and internet channel I could think of. I'd then go to the police and give them a copy too if I could make it that long without getting caught. Maybe if I did all that, even if they got me, someone would help Rachel. Thomas?
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
They paid me $5,000 to go through hell, by Jackson. I had. In fact, I had actually been inside one before, when I was in college. Back then, I was on a real hippy-dippy spiritual journey. You know, meditating a lot, experimenting with psychedelic drugs. primarily magic mushrooms. At some point along that journey, I felt motivated to spend an hour of my life, and $60 of my student loans, inside a sensory deprivation chamber at a local spa. Your standard sensory deprivation chamber is a large metal tank filled with about a foot of salt water. You step in and float in the water, then someone, a spa attendant, in my case, closes off the tank so it's completely dark. With your vision obscured and your body suspended in the water, it's supposed to feel like you no longer have your two primary senses. Depending on who you ask, this is supposed to be relaxing, enhance your creative process, allow you to reach higher consciousness, hallucinate, or maybe gain magic powers. My experience with the chamber in college was fairly lackluster. I remember that the water was too frigid and the salt made my skin itch. It was difficult to concentrate on meditating or channeling my inner chakra or whatever the spa had promised. Truthfully, I did always wonder what it would have been like to get in one of those things while tripping on some magic mushrooms, but I never had the opportunity. This sensory deprivation chamber didn't look anything like the one I used in college. This chamber looked like a vivisected suit of medieval armor strewn across a large metal table. Thousands of tubes and wires connected to the metal body, which was about 3 times larger than my own body. The head or helmet of the chamber was colossal and round with a big brass pipe running out of its crown into the tiled floor beneath it. On the walls surrounding the chamber were 50 or 60 computer screens, 20 or so server boxes, and various iterations of medical equipment that I couldn't name if I tried. Dr. Mona-san was the primary liaison for my involvement on this project. He explained the machine's purpose, brought me the necessary waivers, and answered all my questions. We want you to remain in our sensory deprivation chamber for 3 days. I'm sure my expression betrayed my sense of shock. In your standard deprivation chamber, the occupant is deprived of their sense of sight, feeling, and, to a lesser extent, hearing. This deprivation, this process of shutting the outside world out from the occupant's mind, decreases the burden on their brain. Thus, the occupant's mind is free to wander more freely, free to think more creatively, to undergo a deeper state of thinking, to meditate, and so on. But there is a problem with standard sensory deprivation chambers. Although the brain is freed from most external stimuli, the visual and auditory, the brain will continue to be burdened by internal stimuli. That is to say that the brain is still very aware of its own carrier, the human body. The brain will still react to the hunger and thirst of the vessel that carries it. It will still process both the need to and the action of urination and defecation. These internal interruptions go on, but the point is that standard sensory deprivation chambers cannot truly be said to deprive the occupant of their senses. Even the body's natural sense of touch is completely removed while in the machine. This 4-cord injects a numbing solution into the bloodstream that completely shuts off all feeling. The numbing agent is the most critical asset of our sensory deprivation process. The list went on and on. It became clear that they had truly accounted for everything. Even for me. I was one of hundreds of applicants to be part of the experiment. For the first time in my life, I was the first-round draft pick. The scientists explained to me that I had been chosen for 3 reasons. Number 1, I had no prior history of mental or physical illness that would make my experience in the chamber subject to intervening variables. Their words, not mine. Although the legs will have to be lengthened ever so slightly, you are by far the closest match to our initial design. And number 3, the most critical, there was nothing happening outside of that chamber that would lead to an early termination of the experiment. I had no significant other, no job, no living family members, not even a houseplant to take care of. They could breathe easy knowing that I would remain peacefully within their contraption for the entire length of the experiment. Number 3 was important to the scientists. They had specifically designed the machine to allow for 3 full days of isolation. If the machine's process had to be interrupted early, it would take them a month to reset the machine and run the experiment again. Unfortunately, reason number 3 also meant there was nobody to come looking for me. They had given me several weeks to prepare for the experiment. My only requirement during that time was that I didn't substantially change my body weight or somehow develop bipolar disorder. Somehow, I managed. I spent those few weeks living normally, watching movies, applying for jobs, getting rejected for those jobs, and reading a few books. The process will come in stages. At first, you may endure a mild state of stress. We anticipate that soon after, you will drift into a moderate state of euphoria for the remainder of the process. You will be signaled a few minutes before the experiment is over by a short audio cue. This way, you will emerge from your state of sensory deprivation slowly and be able to reacclimate without any risk of shock. He played the audio cue for me, which was a short musical clip of bells ringing. Then, with little ceremony or deliberation, I was asked to remove my clothing and climb inside the machine. Oh God, what have I done? Except watch. I tried again to scream. I tried again to plead to be let out. I found myself unable to feel any part of my body. I strained my eyes to try and get someone's attention, but no one seemed to be looking at me. The last thing I saw was the face of Dr. Mona-san leaning over me, waving to me, saying something I couldn't quite understand, closing the exoskeleton's face over my own. 00:00:00:00 until deprivation begins. And then everything went dark. Yet time ticked on. I found myself alternating between obsessing about my imprisonment and finding myself adrift in my thoughts. I began to consider the state of my life. My recent unemployment. My lack of close friends. I felt a wave of depression come over me. Was my life really so meaningless that I could be snuffed out of existence for 3 days and no one could possibly care? I felt lonely. Well, of course, I felt lonely. I was, at that moment, the most alone human being there had ever been. Surely there were researchers only a few feet from my terrestrial body, but my mind had been isolated completely. I was as alone as someone could be. Obsessively, I thought about my body and the container that currently housed it. The numbing medicine must have been truly quite something. I couldn't feel the slightest wisp of breath passing through my nasal cavities or the rumble of my stomach. Could I be dead? I knew how I had ended up here. I knew that I had signed up to engage in an experiment that would put me in this exact predicament. But I must admit, I no longer felt very alive. Without my body or the surrounding world as a reference point, it felt as though I had no assurance that I still existed. My thoughts began dueling with one another. Surely I'm not dead. This is exactly what the experiment was supposed to do. B, if you're not dead, then why can't you feel anything? Why can't you feel your breath or saliva or anything? But I know I'm not dead because I'm thinking right now. B, what does that mean? I began to picture myself floating through a void in space. The image was clear in front of my eyes. My body lay flat, my arms stiff, as I rocketed past stars and unfamiliar planets. I watched my body weave past asteroids and through planetary rings. I felt the warmth of the sun on my body and the cold ice of the frozen planets on my skin. There came a time when I realized that I had been in sensory deprivation for a long time. Since I had not been counting, it was impossible to know how long. It felt like it had been days already. They had assured me that I would only be inside the machine for 3 days. But how could I know for sure? Once I was inside, I had no way of getting out. They could keep me for as long as they wanted to. Maybe that was their plan all along. How could they get away with that? B, I don't know if I'm being crazy or not. I don't know how long I've been in here. 1, 2, 4. And on and on. I counted to 60. That was a minute. And then I counted another minute. And another and another and another. I just kept going and going. I never lost focus on the task at hand. Then I hit 1,000 minutes. Technically, 1,000 minutes was only a little more than 16.5 hours. Certainly not the 3-day period I was supposed to be inside the machine. But that was 16.5 hours on top of all the time I had already spent thinking about my life and dreaming about floating through space. Surely I had spent longer thinking to myself than I had counting. I tried to guess how long I had been in the machine. It felt like it had been more than 3 days. I just kept trying to tell myself that I would be let out of the machine soon. Slowly, chunks of my body began to break off and float into the darkness. With each expelled scrap of flesh, a new wave of pain cascaded through my body. I found myself trying to grab onto my frozen body and put it back together, but my arms and legs were so cold that I could not budge. I tried to scream, but my tongue had swelled so large that it filled my crumbling, frigid mouth. All at once, my body exploded into an array of jagged, bloody shards of ice. The pain was indescribable. A. But God, didn't it feel real? B. Yes. A. Are you scared? B. Yes. A. Wait. Do you hear that? At this juncture, we would like to update you as to the status of our experiment. The data we're getting from your brain scans is proving incredibly useful. The medical implications are numerous. We have contacted our institutional review board and obtained permission to extend the experiment indefinitely. This is, of course, in accordance with the liability waivers that you've signed previously. The machine should be able to keep you alive for a few more weeks until your body becomes unable to support it any further. Do not worry, $5,000 will nonetheless be credited into your account. Thank you for your contribution. Your sacrifice will save lives. I tried to scream. I tried to flail my arms in protest and push back against the doctor's words, but my screams were silent and my arms no longer part of me. It was my big toe. My big toe on my right foot. Somehow, someway, it still had feeling. Not a lot of feeling. It felt like when you sit on your hand and it becomes almost, but not quite, numb. Like it was being massaged by a set of pins and needles. I moved the toe around, the little that I could, to try to understand how this feeling had come back. Then I felt it, a tiny prick. The slightest droplet of pain against my big toe. Something sharp. An 4 needle. But still, I felt immeasurable happiness. Because I had a secret weapon on my side. Time. There's an old adage that goes, if you give a monkey a typewriter and infinite time, he will eventually write the complete works of Shakespeare. Similarly, with a partially numb big toe and infinite time to think, I could craft my grand escape. My big toe was too weak to push open the exoskeleton. Despite my straining, I was unable to reach any other cords to pull them out. All I could reach was the 4 needle that had already been pulled out. And with that 4 needle, I hatched my plan. I scraped my toe across it. It stung, but I knew it would do the trick. I knew that I had forced those stupid scientists' hands. My efforts had made a cut in my toe skin. And now I knew I was going to be okay. This is Dr. Mona-san again, communicating via the tiny speaker in the helmet of the exoskeleton. It seems you have managed to injure yourself inside the exoskeleton. After some discussion, we have elected to pause the experiment and correct the error. Stand by, the exoskeleton will be opening shortly. I stared down at my big toe, now wrapped in a bandage. Somehow it had not dawned on me that, even if I got out of the machine, the scientists were unlikely to let me out of the building alive. Not after they decided to imprison me until I died, anyway. So it didn't matter. I was already doomed. I might as well delay for as long as I could. And from that thought, I came up with a plan. I knew I would only have a few seconds. I knew I couldn't run immediately, or they would catch me. I would have to convince them I was resigned to my fate. When the questioning concluded, I found myself being hauled back into the chamber containing the exoskeleton. Perhaps assuming that I would flee otherwise, the scientists kept me tied up during transit. I felt pinpricks in my right arm. I was already being loaded up with the numbing agent. My time was going to be short. As some of the lab coats approached me on my left side to insert another 4, I launched myself upward so I was standing inside the machine. Surprised by my sudden motion, the scientists on my left recoiled. I felt a sharp pain in my right arm as the IVs and tubes held tight against the strain of my sudden motion. I propelled myself out of the machine and onto the floor, naked as the day I was born. The numbing agent had disabled my right arm, but most of my body was fine. I sprinted towards the door through which I had entered the lab, what now seemed like a millennium ago. I did not dare turn back to see if I was being chased. All I could do was run. My hopes were dashed as soon as I reached the top of the stairs. At least 15 men guarded the building's exit. Clearly my escape had been a contingency for which the facility was prepared. As the men approached behind me and in front of me, I knew there was only one way I could go. Soon I was on the last staircase. A ladder, hanging from the ceiling, led up to a hatch on the roof of the building. This was it. I was going to see the outside world again. I didn't know where I was going to go once I got up there, but I knew I was free. I reacted purely out of instinct. My grip on the ladder tightened and I swung my free foot at the doctor's face. As my heel collided with his jaw, sending teeth and blood flying in all directions, I couldn't help but smile at the feeling. It hurt like you wouldn't believe, but it felt damned good to feel something. Dr. Mona-san relaxed his grip. I pushed upwards again and the hatch gave way. I clambered upwards onto the flat roof of the building. A thin layer of gravel covered the rooftop. The sharp stones poked at my bare feet, but I kept moving. I ran to the edge of the roof and looked out into the city. Just as one of the researchers reached out to grab me, I took a step backward. As my body tumbled down to the earth below, I found myself laughing. It was just like when I was in the machine. My body was floating once again. The cold air numbed my body and, once again, I couldn't feel a thing. Just before I struck the ground, I heard the sound of church bells ringing out. Hallelujah! I figured I must be on my way to heaven. No heaven came. Instead, I found myself in complete darkness. Feeling nothing, seeing nothing, simply ruminating on my previous actions. Is this what death is like? In answer to my question, I heard a familiar voice. Hello. This is Dr. Mona-san. I am speaking to you once again via a small speaker contained within the helmet of the exoskeleton. You have successfully completed your 3 days within the exoskeleton. Had I not still been pumped full of numbing drugs, I would have wept. We are currently in the process of opening the machine. At that point, we will perform a physical assessment. I'm sure you are anxious to leave. I can assure you we will move as quickly as possible to make that happen. Thank you so much for your assistance with this project. It has been invaluable. 3 days. I had been in that machine for exactly 3 days. It didn't click for me until they were pulling me out of the machine. There was no bandage on my big toe, no needle near my foot on which I could have cut myself. The facility was nothing but accommodating in the hours after the experiment terminated. They provided me with a comfortable place to rest while the remainder of the drugs left my system. Although they asked questions about my experience, they were not hostile when I refused to speak. The researchers were happy to answer my questions about the experience. Happy to tell me it was all in my head. It's like all my fantasies have come true. A. But you're out of the machine. Your 3 days are up. B. Yes, but. B. But it felt real. A. Does this feel real? B. I don't know anymore. Could 3 days feel even longer? Could I imagine a therapist, a job, a better life? I don't know. Sometimes I close my eyes and I become too afraid to open them, because I'm worried that when I do, I will see only darkness. I'm scared I will find myself still floating, motionless, amongst those imaginary stars.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
And what happened next? Prudence had a facial expression filled with guilt, and now I knew the truth. I could see it. The creature was exactly how Ian had described, except with wavy ginger hair and a sadness in its beady eyes. This abomination was Lila. This was how Prudence had bought her back, and this was the only way I would ever see Jamie again, a risk I wasn't going to take. After days of disbelief, the reality finally hit me like a ton of bricks. Jamie was dead and he wasn't coming back. Why did you do this? I asked, my voice shaking with horror. Prudence scowled at me, trying to mask her shame. I didn't want this. If you think this was my aim, then you're sicker than I am. I just wanted my granddaughter back. We had moved into the flat not long after my son left home to move in with his girlfriend. He's the youngest of 3 and was the last to fly the nest, so we downsized for the 2 of us. He never knew what we were facing in that flat, or the dangers that he sent his little girl into. Prudence paused to gaze longingly at the mutated little girl in the cage. The creature just twitched. In return it bared its 4 rows of teeth and made a gentle hiss. Around the time Lila went missing, the council granted planning permission for the tower block next door. But before that was built, the land it sits on acted as a communal garden for ours and the neighboring tower block on the other side. It had a regular gardener named Derek who you would often see tending the flower beds out front. Derek was one of the first people I met when I moved in. Like I said, I had to work it all out myself, and the first time the window cleaner came to the balcony I naturally reached to let him in and offer a cup of tea. There was Derek. He stopped me and told me not to let the man in, that I would be making a huge mistake. It took me a minute to process it, but I know what I'd seen. That was the real window cleaner. I never intentionally opened or tried to open the door for him again. That day Derek didn't stay long. He didn't tell me what the window cleaner is, or why he visits every few days. He didn't explain anything about the weird things that go on. As much as Derek was a part of the strange happenings, he was like one that had been carved from light. He changed when they granted planning permission for the other block though. He knew his garden would be dug up to lay foundations and his uses redundant. He became grumpy and bitter over time, but no one paid enough attention to notice. Especially not when my tragedy struck. He worked so hard on the agreement with the creatures, he spent a lot of time with them. Lila broke the rule and he had to allow them to do what had been agreed, he said. He couldn't have stopped them. But he wanted to help make things right. I snapped and told him that it didn't matter because it was all about to be bulldozed in the next few days anyway. He told me it was simple and that all I had to do was enter the lift and offer the creatures some food whilst repeating the phrase Reverter Mortuus during their frenzied hours. He said that there was no guarantee they wouldn't be crunching on my bones before I even got the first word out, but that if I succeeded I would have Lila back. I thought nothing happened at first. She didn't appear straight away, but a few days later I found her running round inside my house. She'd taken a chunk out of Damon's ear with her teeth. I tried to kill her at first, but just as I was about to finalize it I saw in her eyes who she was. I was exhausted. It was a lot of information to take in, and as a result of the information I'd received, real grief for my boyfriend was finally settling in. Every hope I had was dashed. I know many of you tried to tell me in the comments that he was gone, but I wanted you to be wrong so bad. I couldn't bear to look at Prudence Hemmings for another moment. I made my excuses and left, morosely riding the bus back to the tower block I had once been so excited to live in. When I woke up it was late, about 10 p.m. I wrote as much of my update as I could for you guys, hit post, and just sat at the dining table with my head in my hands. My whole life had fallen to shit and I knew it. Terry answered. Her perfectly bobbed hair was a little unkempt and out of place, she had huge bags under her eyes and I could smell wine on her breath. "Are you okay, Kat?" She looked concerned. I found it ironic that she looked so disheveled I had forgotten it was me who came for help. I heard another crash, giggling and some inaudible shouting. After a while things went quiet and Terry came back into the living room. "Sorry about that, kids, you know," she announced, brushing off the noises. I'd almost forgotten about Eddie and Ellie. It was late already, and by the resigned expression on Terry's face indicated that this was how all her nights began. I nodded. I couldn't muster up much more of a response. I think she could see that I just needed to sit there. She got up to finish making and then set the cup of tea in front of me with 2 digestive biscuits. I hadn't eaten properly in days and I really needed the sugar. It turned out me and Terry get along really well. We have similar taste in movies, music and food despite the age gap. We spoke for about an hour about random, normal stuff. It was nice to get a break from the madness. I got used to the crashing around from the twins. I even laughed a few times. I'd forgotten what that felt like these past few days. The break didn't last long. The next noise that we heard was louder than the first. It was quickly followed by 2 small children, running into the living room, diving into their mother's arms. I was taken aback for a moment. Eddie and Ellie were dressed in pajamas, and were still the cute children that I had met in the hallway, but something was different. Their brown puppy dog eyes had become deep voids, like what I'd imagined when Prue described the window cleaner's true form. And at the ends of their fingers were long sharp claws protruding from where nails should be. It had been a very long day and I thought my nightmare was over, but it was only just beginning. Ellie mumbled into Terry's shoulder, in that high-pitched voice kids do when they're scared. What have you done?" Terry asked, color drained from her face. That's why it took me a while to spot her in the crowd, even though she had been glaring at me the entire time. How our confrontation went.
You're still tuned to Horror Slop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Part 1. Part 2. She hesitated a moment before breaking into a smile. "Is that what you call me? I like it. My name is actually Melanie though." She nodded. "Yeah, it's me." I frowned, a new line of fear cutting through my happy haze. "What do you mean?" She held the bridge of her nose for a moment, looking down like she was trying to figure out how to say whatever it was she had to say. "Thomas, you're part of a psychological experiment. I've been a part of it for longer than you have as one of the actors, and I still don't know all the details. I'm pretty sure it's run by some government agency, and I know they're investing a lot of money and time into it, but for what reasons, that I'm not so sure. I nodded weakly, my tongue thick in my throat. Yeah. A red one. And a green one. She sighed and nodded. I think they're testing how much you'll obey. What choices you'll make based off of your morals, your intelligence, and your fear. It's interesting, or at least I thought so when I first joined up 6 years ago. They've never officially given me many details, just the overall gist. But people talk. The other actors and me, sometimes we hear things, and we gossip. She smiled sadly. That's what caused me to start feeling bad. I interrupted. Other actors. That's why I had to break the rules and contact you. When they started doing this hidden message, mind game bullshit, I got worried. Worried you would take it too serious. That you could get hurt, or even hurt yourself. As soon as you left your shift tonight, I talked to one of the guys in the video department. He told me about how you had reacted. Showed me how you were still parked down the street from the building. I drove over, the bedroom set is in a building outside of town. I saw you sitting in your car, and I almost approached you then, but I was scared of getting caught and fired. So I parked and waited until I could follow you somewhere else and let you know I was okay. I felt an angry heat growing in my chest. Well, that's nice of you. I pulled my arm back from her touch. Well, thanks I guess. At least you stopped me before I went to the police and looked like a joke in front of them too. I just wanted her gone, her sympathetic, pitying eyes off of me. Thanks for stopping by and letting me in on it. I tried to make my voice sound hard and unfeeling, but it came out watery instead. Standing up, I turned away from her so she couldn't see as I started to cry. If you don't mind, I need time to think about everything. It's a lot. Thomas, please don't do that. I don't think they would hurt us, but if you up and quit, they'll figure out I've talked to you. I don't think they watch us all the time, but I don't know what they can find out. You know, tracking cell phones, spy satellites, whatever. I'm taking a big risk just being here, and I don't want them catching on. I shrugged uncertainly. It made some sense, and once I had calmed down, it would probably make more. She gave my hand a squeeze. I felt my hand growing clammy in hers as my stomach fluttered. Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I would really like that. Swallowing, I added, how long do we have to wait to see each other again? Melanie grinned at me. Work another month or so. Save what you can. And then quit. I'll wait another 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll do the same. And then, she looked up at the ceiling as she pondered it for a moment, and I was struck again by how beautiful she was, even if she was a little different in person than I had imagined. 3 months from tonight we'll meet right here. I'll come over and we can start getting to know each other better. How's that sound? When she left a couple of minutes later, part of me hated to see her go, but another part was relieved. I was so exhausted, and while I was so happy she was okay and we had finally met, I felt like the burned up wire in an old light bulb. I needed time alone. Time to think and calm down, and most of all, time to rest. Still, I went into the surveillance room with a much lighter heart. I didn't have to worry or feel guilty anymore about not helping her, and there was some satisfaction in finally pulling one over on the people that had tricked me for so long. Besides, in 3 months I would be done with this place and get to see R.A., Melanie again. In person, at least. Because I got to watch her on the video feed as soon as I came into work. She was asleep when I first got there, and I found myself wondering if she was as tired as I still felt. When she woke up later and started reading a book, I found myself beginning to smile and had to stop myself. I should still be worried acting, not smiling like I had a crush. I had to do better so Melanie didn't get in trouble. An hour or so later she started working on another of her paintings. Watching her work, I was amazed at how real it all looked. It was hard to see everything from my angle, but I would have sworn she had paint on those brushes and was really painting whatever was on the canvas. I found myself feeling proud of her. She really was a great actress. Not only didn't I see her giving any clues that we had met or talked, but she really did seem different in the room than she had in my apartment. I suppose that was what she had meant by playing a role. I was almost at the end of my shift, and while I hated to leave her, I had to admit that I was ready for some more sleep. Trying to guard my reactions all day had been exhausting, and I was dreading the next few weeks. But then I realized she was done painting. I expected her to just go and do something else, but instead she picked up the canvas at its edges and carefully walked it over to the sofa. Her body was blocking it at first, but then she stepped aside. I felt my heart start to hammer and I forced myself to stay calm. No point in being silly. I knew it was all a game now, and I just had to play my part a little while longer. Still, the worried me would want to know what the words said, so I might as well try to read them. I squinted, following the birds right to left and top to bottom. Oh no. Part 4.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
It's not just us we have to keep safe. We travel with 4 dogs, each with their own quirks. Nova is our sweet old Labrador Terrier mix, slow and half-blind but quick to sense danger. Kyra's a Husky Wolf mix with an intense blue stare who loves everyone she meets. Aura, our Pomeranian Husky mix, has heterochromia and nary a brain cell to be found. And then there's Hela, yes, named after the Marvel goddess, a sharp-minded Doberman who takes guarding the RV more seriously than most security systems. It's usually Hela who alerts us when something's wrong. She's fearless about things most dogs would avoid. The supernatural doesn't faze her. Balloons and vacuum cleaners. Those are another story entirely. But when the demons show up, Hela is the first to react. Last time it happened, one of them appeared right outside our bedroom window in the dead of night. Hela launched herself at the screen and tore it to pieces trying to get to him. I was in the shower, rinsing shampoo from my hair, when a heavy sense of dread settled over me. Something felt off. I wasn't a timid kid. I played with snakes and spiders, and looked forward to Halloween more than my birthday. I used to imagine werewolves living under my bed, not to scare me, but to protect me. Monsters had always felt more like friends, until I met a real one. I'm lucky. She believed me. She told me that demons couldn't stand holy things, like how vampires hated garlic or sunlight. So I started sleeping with a Bible tucked beside me, hoping it would keep Blueface away. I didn't see him face to face again for a long time, but he never left. Instead, he sank into the shadows around me and poisoned everyone I loved. He never touched anyone else, not directly. But when I was near, something in them twisted. My parents began to fight constantly. The house filled with tension, then hatred, and finally silence. They divorced soon after. Both sides of the family were cruel in different ways. I was the scapegoat. The misfit. The easy target. My Aunt Sharon even tried to kill me a couple of times, and it was lucky that my premonitions warned me. At school, it wasn't any better. Students tormented me. Teachers turned cold and I was repeatedly in trouble. It wasn't just bullying. It was like something invisible about me made people recoil. Like they could sense I was different, and not in a good way. I felt cursed. But then his dad, my uncle, snapped. He shot Tommy and then himself. After that, I stopped letting people get so close. I had some other cousins I was and still am fond of, especially Joe, Logan and Nix. But I was afraid they would eventually grow tired of me, or that something would happen to them. So I surrounded myself with animals instead. I begged my mom to let me have more and more pets, until my room was practically a miniature zoo. Rin had a much earlier start with Yellow than I did with Blue, although I now realize we were both inundated with them around the same time. She's just a few years younger than me. At some point during the night, she watched, utterly fascinated, as a strange blue orb of light materialized above her and floated into the panda. She lay there, confused, wondering if she was dreaming, until the panda abruptly animated and began to violently kick her. Terrified, she ran to her parents' bedroom, only to realize neither of them were home. Sadly, this wasn't uncommon. When her mom returned the next morning, Rin tried to explain what had happened. Unlike my mom, Rin's mother didn't believe her. She screamed at her for lying and acting out for attention. But in a rare moment of compassion, her adoptive dad sat her down later that day and explained what it all meant. He told her that she had a gift, a way of seeing beyond the ordinary, and that dark things had already taken notice. He warned her to be careful what she interacted with, or she could end up in real danger. To help her start navigating it, he took her to a haunted doll museum, so she could begin learning the differences between the living and the dead. There, she saw and spoke with 2 ghost children, her first friendly encounter. But to this day, she still doesn't trust dolls. And clowns? Those remain a full-blown phobia. Rin saw Yellow's actual face for the first time when she was 7. She and a friend were playing hide-and-seek in her new apartment. Rin went to hide in the walk-in closet, and that's when she appeared. Those gleaming, yellow, animalistic eyes cut right through the darkness like teeth. That's the detail Rin remembers the clearest. Not the rest of her face. Just the eyes. They're still a regular feature of her nightmares. Yellow held her there, trapped in that closet for hours. Her so-called friend wasn't even looking for her. She just sat on the couch watching cartoons. No one came for Rin until her mom got home late that night and found her, shaken and sobbing, still inside the closet. It didn't stop there. Barely a week later, Yellow shoved Rin down a flight of concrete steps. The fall left her with a scar running down her spine, a permanent reminder of just how real Yellow is. After the next move, Yellow changed tactics. She began to mess with Rin's life more subtly, but no less cruelly. Important items would vanish and turn up in strange places, if they ever turned up at all. Things Rin knew she hadn't touched. Her mom thought she was just being careless and would scold her. Worse, people started accusing Rin of stealing. It was humiliating and isolating. Then Yellow began mimicking her. Not just her voice or movements, but her actual appearance. At first glance, you might think it was Rin standing there, until you noticed the twisted, unnatural grin or the hateful yellow eyes. Unlike Blue, Yellow doesn't care if she is seen. She wants to be seen. Numerous people over the years have caught glimpses of her and were deeply unsettled. Meanwhile, Blue was becoming more aggressive. In my teenage years, he stopped lurking and started attacking. I was shoved off of furniture, scratched, bitten, struck in the face, and more than once, pushed from dangerous heights. I'm more durable than an ordinary human, but I stopped keeping pets after a while. As each beloved animal passed from old age, I couldn't bear to replace them. I was terrified Blue might start hurting them, too. After another move, this time across state lines to live with my mom and her boyfriend, Jim, things were peaceful for a while. Almost too peaceful, until Blue found us again. And he was livid. For the first time, he didn't just lash out at me. He possessed Jim. Yellow mirrored Blue in making people mistreat Rin the same way they did to me. Her adoptive dad, who she believed was her real dad, started physically abusing and assaulting her. Rin's mom didn't believe her and continued sending her over to him. She ran away once, and her mom didn't even notice she was gone. But despite the horror Yellow inflicted, Rin found an ally in the most unexpected way. She was supposed to have had a twin brother, but he was absorbed in the womb. That can happen sometimes. That twin, Danny, lives on inside her, and eventually, she was able to start communicating with him. He has a clear personality of his own, and they learned how to share bodily control. Danny became one of Rin's greatest comforts. Anytime she needed a break from abuse or had to do something overwhelming, like swim, he'd take over. Unlike Rin, Danny loves the water. The only thing he's afraid of are spiders, which Rin and I love, much to his dismay. Rin and I met on an online forum on Valentine's Day, 2017. It was ironic. We were immediately drawn to each other in a way neither of us had ever felt before. We were shocked by how much we had in common: real horror, genuine monsters, lives shaped by things most people wouldn't believe. We had a lot of rare abilities in common. It felt like fate. She moved in with me and my family in August 2018, on my birthday, no less. Best birthday gift I've ever gotten. At first, it seemed like Blue and Yellow were going to be, mortal enemies. Honestly, we were delighted about that. We watched them become consumed with fighting each other, and for a while, they left us alone. We were dismayed, though not particularly surprised when they eventually resolved their differences and teamed up. They still bicker like an old married couple, but now they work together. Yellow even appeared to my mom once, who mistook her for Rin. When we explained that Rin has a demon too, well, my mom started making plans for us all to move again. Blue and Yellow were both tormenting my grandma, and her health was starting to decline rapidly. We were afraid the demons were going to kill her. The first place Rin, my mom, and I moved into had the ghost of a young woman who'd recently died there. She wasn't hostile, just sad. But within weeks, Blue and Yellow caught up to us. Rin got shoved headfirst into a bucket of mop water at work and had a nasty reaction to the chemicals. I was partly shoved into a bubbling fry vat, hot oil licking the edge of my arm. Rin almost got arrested when Yellow disappeared a bunch of cash out of her register till. Blue caused me to get a concussion. We lost multiple jobs, and even more friends, thanks to their antics. After that, we left Wyoming entirely. We lived out of our car in Colorado through the dead of winter, nearly freezing our butts off. In 2022, we managed to get the RV. It's not perfect, but it's ours. We've traveled all over the country, but nowadays we float somewhere in the Rockies of Colorado. Still, we've fallen in love with the spot we're hiding in now. The mountain air is cool and crisp, even in the height of summer. The altitude makes everything feel lighter, quieter, almost like we belong here. I wish we could buy land somewhere nearby and finally settle down. We're getting so tired of always running. We're nearing our time limit again. Hella has been restless at night, growling low and constant, unable to fully relax. Unfortunately, we can't move the RV right now. The only road out is buried under deep, soggy mud puddles that the RV can't safely traverse with its old tires. And at night, we've started to hear scratching along the sides and roof of the RV. I really hate demons.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
Our father kept a second family in the pipes, by Verden Voidling. We almost never spoke to them, though they always tried to strike conversation. They were amicable. Polite, you know. They would ask us questions about our interests or how our day was. At least at first. Their soft voices would ooze out from the kitchen sink and the shower drain. Places like that. Sometimes, they would follow us, my sister and I, around the house. They would slither through the pipes like snakes to whisper in our ears. He said those voices in the pipes belonged to his other wife and his other children. He said it in the same way that somebody says that grass is green. As if we should intrinsically understand the bizarre bullshit he was spewing. Beyond that, he would only tell us that they are important to him and that he loves them every bit as much as he loves us. We heard him screaming in the bathroom that night. I tried to ask what was wrong, but he just yelled at me to go to bed. I cried myself to sleep. I think we both did, but I couldn't bring myself to ask Olivia, my sister, about it. Watching him slip away from us made a certain amount of sense the first time. We lost our mom, and he lost his wife. That crushing despair and sudden loneliness could defeat anybody. I never blamed him for it the first time, but the second. I still don't think I've forgiven him for what those days were like. He would lock himself in the bathroom for hours and spend time with his second family. Our dinners started to shrink while the amount of pureed meat he poured down the drain grew. It didn't take us long to recognize that we were no longer the priority, and it didn't take long after that for resentment to sprout within our hearts. We tried to confront Dad, once. Olivia and I screamed at the bathroom door as we pounded with both fists. He gently opened the door and spoke to us in a whisper. "You guys need to get out of here." And then, louder, "You are interrupting family story time, and it is frankly very rude." The house appeared to have been ransacked. Every edible morsel had disappeared, presumably, down the drain. We found our father slumped over the bathroom sink with a knife in his hand. His skin was gray, and his eyes looked glassy. Like a doll's eyes. Chunks of flesh had been hacked out of him. A bloody scrap of his thigh, still clutched in his fingertips, lay dangling over the drain. As Olivia and I stood in horror, we watched a long, slender appendage like a butterfly's proboscis rise from the drain and yank the ragged piece of flesh out of our father's cold, dead hand. It didn't hurt as much as it should have, which hurts in its own way. I think I must have gotten used to the idea of losing him, or maybe I just hated him enough in that moment to pretend I had. I numbly dialed 911, and after explaining the situation, I took one last glance at my father's corpse. I wanted to cry, but the tears never came. 5 bottles of Drano, styrofoam, and gasoline, just like you said. I felt proud of myself for getting exactly what she had requested. What's it for? 5 bottles of Drano later, and our father's other family had only reacted with groans of mild discomfort. Like how you might sound if you got splashed with water on a cold day. I was desperately trying to brainstorm other ideas when they stopped groaning and spoke again. I'm not going to lie to you. We kind of lost our shit after that. Not with fear, but with anger at the audacity of this thing. It had taken our father, and now it was soiling the memory of our mother. We screamed ourselves hoarse and brought bedlam down upon the bathroom. We broke, pretty much everything. We threw anything that wasn't nailed down at the sink in blind rage. After that, I collapsed against the wall, crying in a way that I hadn't since Mom had her accident. Olivia stood, shoulders shaking, in the doorway looking as if she were waiting for permission. "Olivia," I said. "Get the styrofoam." We figured it might take some time to burn its way down into the pipes, but we underestimated how hot it would be in the meantime. Roughly 5 minutes past ignition, Aunt Gertrude, home early from work, burst in demanding to know what that horrible smell was. She had just enough time to process the wrecked, partially burning bathroom before she found out exactly what that horrible smell was. The pipes under the sink melted away, and a gout of steam flung flaming napalm across the room, directly into the face of our aunt. The house burnt to the ground. We didn't stick around to make absolutely sure they were dead, but we saw the thin shadows of their flailing appendages dancing on the burning curtains. That was enough for us to feel satisfied in washing our hands of it all. Olivia and I got in our father's 1993 Ford Bronco, and we left. We abandoned our old lives and identities entirely. We were already murder suspects. We were not about to beat arson charges, not to mention the accidental murder of Aunt Gertrude. So we just drove away without any idea of where we were headed. Anywhere had to be better than what used to be home.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I'd never heard of the Canyon Yellow until they announced what the school play was gonna be this year. This was strange. It wasn't like our theater department to put on something obscure. Last year we did Oklahoma for the 17th time in our school's 80-year history. Creepy shit. The talent in our theater department is pretty average for a high school, by which I mean all of our actors are very bad. Even the people who get the leading roles are just kind of okay. Frank's confident and jacked, but he can't act, or sing, or remember his lines. He also misses a lot of rehearsals for sports practice of some kind. I don't remember what he plays and I don't really care. Chris can actually sing and maybe he can act, it's just hard to tell because he talks so quietly. Claire's alright as an actor, but so annoying as a person it more than cancels out. She acts like one of those popular girl characters you see in movies, even though no one outside the theater department knows who she is. What do you want? I said. Why? No, I meant why do you need me to do it? Mr. Castaigne hates us, remember? So now everyone who was in that group chat is on his shit list. I mean, what are you so busy with right now? I decided that I would rather go and talk to Mr. Castaigne than tell Claire I was spending my lunch playing Smash Carts on my computer, so off I went. Read it. He said. It has changed my life, it will change yours, and soon it will change everything. I only realized that I'd forgotten to ask him about the casting now that I'm writing this. I was just so relieved to get out of there.
You're still tuned to Horror Slop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
The Monster Under Your Bed Isn't Always There to Scare You, by Life Estrangement. I was lying alone in my room when I heard the voice, deep and crackly, coming from beneath my bed. Hey, the voice called out. I told myself I was just imagining it. I drew my knees up to my chest and ducked my head under the blanket, trying to shut out the voice and the cold wind that drifted in through the window, ruffling the curtains. I'm the monster underneath your bed, the voice replied. You mean you're real? I asked. Oh, well, what is it? Frank. Frank? Yeah, the monster said. Is there something wrong with that? Well, my parents didn't want me to be a monster. A dentist. That's funny, I said. I could feel myself beginning to smile. I don't know. Hey Frank. What? Why would I do that? Well, you're a monster, aren't you? Well, yeah, of course I am, but that doesn't mean that I scare little kids. But I thought that was your job. Am I a bad person? I asked. No, he said, but you're not the one I'm here to scare. The man inside your closet. My parents rushed into the room and asked me what had happened, but I didn't know what to say, only that someone had been hiding in my closet and they'd jumped out the window. I never heard from Frank the monster again, but the officer who arrested Gary told me that he sleeps on the floor of the facility.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
I found an extremely bizarre internet survey by Mr. Outlaw. Being abruptly fired from a job you've worked at for the past 10 years, and then catching your girl cheating on you with your replacement really makes a man think. At that moment, I thought that the best way to go about it was completing those internet surveys that yielded $5 Subway gift cards and other shit like that after about an hour of answering questions. I mean, I didn't have any other marketable skills that could have yielded immediate income. It was either that or wasting the day away playing computer games. At least I wouldn't have to pay for food. I did these surveys for about 5 hours before nearly passing out. It was way more excruciating than I'd originally anticipated. At the end of those 5 hours, I'd accumulated about $45 in cash and gift cards. $9 an hour. Not like I was making much more than that before. I was about to close my laptop up for the day and head to a bar in an attempt to drown out my melancholy when I first saw it. It shouldn't even have been noticeable, but for one reason or another, it was. At the bottom corner of the website that I was on, existed a tiny, singular advertisement. Maybe it was the simplicity that got me. Plain black letters in a tacky font that read, "Surveys for Cash," overlapped a completely white background. At least they were direct with the message. One more couldn't hurt, I thought. Might as well scrape together a little bit more booze money before heading out. I sat back down, clicked on the picture link and prepared myself to grind through some more painstaking inquiries. The first few questions were simple enough. I guess they weren't really questions, but more data collection. My name, age, and occupation. I thought it was kind of weird that they also asked my height and weight, but it wasn't unheard of. In plain English, this is what popped up on my screen: how strong is your urge to currently look behind you? There were 5 options below, ranging from not at all to overwhelming. There was no feasible reason why I should have been afraid at that moment. But I was. I tightened my breathing, trying to make out any subtle noises behind me. There were none. After maybe about 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to look. There was nothing. I sighed in relief and scoffed at myself at the same time. Again, I must have stupidly stared at it for nearly 10 minutes. Was this some kind of obscure personality test? I mean, it must have been, right? Right? Once again, I clicked next. Probably shouldn't have. The questions started getting fucked up. They weren't too gory or explicit, not anything like that. They were just stranger. Weirder. More psychologically disturbing. If you're wondering why the hell I kept going, I can't really give you an explicit answer to that. I just felt like I had to. It was an esoteric, creeping sensation that I can't quite explain away. But I could never shake it. So I just went on. Some of the questions that stood out were: you're in a hotel room but are awoken by a rapid knocking at your window. You peek through the blinds, seeing what appears to be a man missing both his eyes. He puts his mouth to the glass and tells you to kill the woman in the bathroom immediately. Do you listen to him? This was one of my least favorites. In addition to this insanity-inducing shit, there were some rather disconcerting events happening in real life as well. I received a knock at the door about 30 minutes in. I looked through my peephole to find a guy standing there, frantically shaking his head and mouthing, "No," while making direct eye contact with me. He looked terrified. Obviously, I didn't open up. I received about 10 phone calls from somebody named The Auditor on my caller ID. They left a message every time, but each one was just a recording that consisted of somebody saying numbers through heavy static. Actually, it sounded more like screaming now that I think about it. About an hour into this thing, and I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I was petrified of looking behind me, even though there was no indication that anything should have been there. I heard some soft scratching coming from my vent at one point, so I moved my couch over it. Almost as if it were on cue, I heard more knocking at my door about 5 seconds after reading this. As slowly and silently as I could, I moved over and looked through the peephole once again. It was a different person than the one I'd seen earlier. She was a woman, looking to be in her mid-20s. She was wearing a thick blazer, despite it being around 90 Fahrenheit outside. She was also wearing sunglasses, so I could never really tell where she was actually looking. She eventually took a piece of paper out of her pocket and slipped it under the door. I looked down and read it. It's lying. Leave your apartment immediately. It's been about half an hour since. I can't bring myself to look at the computer screen nor at the woman outside. She's still there. I can see the shadows of her feet from underneath my door. I heard my bedroom window open a few minutes ago, but I've since jammed the door shut with a chair. I can hear some kind of distorted muttering coming from behind it now.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is Horror Slop.
The mountain phase of Ranger School should not be in Appalachia, by N3RW3BB. In 2018 I was undergoing infantry officer training and was attending the storied Ranger School during the latter half of the year. Ranger School is an at minimum 63-day leadership course that uses starvation, sleep deprivation, and physical exhaustion to mimic combat stressors. All the while conducting graded simulated combat missions and planning. Phase 2 of the 3 phases is based out of Camp Merrill, Georgia, and the training missions take place in the Appalachian Mountains northwest of Dahlonega, Georgia. It was late October or was it early November? I do not recall a precise date due to the days and missions blending together. Roger Sergeant, am I still in leadership position? I responded shakily. The adrenaline dump of being in leadership was starting again, waking me up. Normally we would change positions after the actions on the objective portion of the mission was over. You got that, Go Webb? He asked supportively. Yeah, as long as this march doesn't turn into a soup sandwich I should get my go. We walked over to our rucks where the rest of the squad gathered in a penguin huddle to keep warm as the late fall wind blew, chilling their rain-soaked uniforms. They complimented me on my grit, and hoped I would get my go. I was all alone in the rear, which made the grading easier for me and I would not have to walk up and down these mountains again after that night. The hand and arm signal to move out made its way back to me and I repeated it behind me. Nobody was there but you are supposed to regardless. I conducted a press check on my M4 to ensure I had a blank round chambered and the magazine was seated and the walk began. We marched up a switchback and over the wind and the rustling leaves I heard a whistle, incoming, shouted one ranger ahead of me and everyone joined in as we got down. But the whistle, it wasn't a shriek, it was melodic. No explosion came. What the fuck, Rangers? Yelled the RI leading the file. I could hear and see the shapes of a handful of Rangers attempting to explain, swearing they heard a whistle. The RI, realizing it was one or two making a mistake, told them I was likely an echo from one of the other platoons or ridge over training. The wired ranger from earlier said, yeah, I heard a tune too, weird. Blinking quickly, the whistling ranger responded, puzzled. I do not know, man, I was just replying. The confused face on the ranger clued me in that he was probably droning and not aware of much else than he needed to keep walking. "If you hear something, alert me and I'll radio the PL for a course of action," I told him as he began walking again and closed the gap in the file. "What the fuck?" I said, pushing the barrel down away from my face. "Did you not hear that? Somebody was calling my name, Richard, from over there." The ranger manically spouted out, pointing to what looked like a game trail that was wreathed in shadows that the moonlight did not illuminate. I smelled the odor of rotten meat from that direction. I used my infrared, floodlight on my rifle to allow me to see through the darkness, and I saw nothing but disturbed underbrush 3 meters in front of us off of the game trail. "I think you were droning and spooked a deer that ran off, let's go." I ushered the ranger back to the file. While walking back onto the trail, I saw in the middle of the file another ranger wandering off to the trail to the left. I keyed my radio to the platoon net to alert the leadership. I kneeled with the wired ranger pulling rear security as we waited. I stood up to see what was going on and could see 3 rangers walking back because their floodlights were on. The radio crackled. "This is 3rd, Douglas thought someone was calling his name in the woods, Charlie Mike." 3rd squad leader reported. I felt a sense of dread and fear that I had not felt since a dreadful Halloween in college or the campfire stories told around the campfire in the Ozarks as a Boy Scout. I turned to the wired ranger. "Keep your head on a swivel." "Contact left," yelled out a ranger towards the front of the file. A dozen M4s and a couple automatic M249s began firing blank rounds into the trees. I followed the IR lasers showing where the rangers were looking, and I saw a shadowy figure running back into the woods and back towards me and the rear of the formation. My radio squelched to life, and the squad leader that called out the contact reported what they thought was Opfer had charged the formation. The weapons squad opened up with one of their M240s towards the entity, drowning out all other noise with controlled bursts from the belt-fed machine gun. The figure moved fast towards my position, looking like it was avoiding the sounds and flashes of blank gun fire. It moved in an animalistic way through the trees. It cut towards the column and lounged into formation before the rangers started shooting. 3 rangers fell backwards on impact and started rolling down the hill. Those still standing there started shooting blanks at it. I moved towards the scuffle. The entity was more visible as it was attempting to pull a ranger into the woods. Well over 300 pounds of man and equipment was being dragged away like a child. In the direct moonlight I could make out its form, a gaunt figure with its skeletal frame protruding from tight skin, its legs bent with extra joints, and the mouth was human-like, but the flesh around it was ripped and torn. It looked directly at me, its eyes were deep set in its sunken face, eyes glowed in my nods. I arrived at the site of its attack and saw Wolf. "Grab 2 and follow me," I commanded. "Was that Opfer?" he asked. I backed up to him, keeping my rifle at the low ready as I loaded a fresh magazine into it and scanned the forest. "I do not think so, but the RI sounds confident that it was an exercise," I responded. Wolf gave an attempt at bravado. Damn, Opfer really took spooky season to heart. Wolf's team, the rescued ranger, and I rejoined the platoon as the last of the trio of rangers were pulled up the steep slope. Their falls had been slowed and stopped by brush and trees. I returned to the rear of the formation, passing by rangers that showed no sign of comprehending what just happened. They were all still droning even after all of that. I radioed the platoon leader reporting that men, weapons, and equipment were all accounted for. I did not want to be on this trail a minute longer. The march continued, and when I received the hand and arm signal to move out, I did not pass it on out of the feeling we could still be followed. After what felt like another 15 minutes, we left the covering of the thick canopy of the trail and began movement on a Forest Service road as we normally did. I looked back at the trailhead and there were what still looked like faces hidden in the trees. A melodic whistle cut through the cold breeze as if it was saying, "Come again." The wired ranger turned around and asked, "Did you hear that?" Half an hour later I received my go as the patrol base was being set up for the platoon to sleep. I asked about the thing that attacked us. The RI only referred to the contact with the ominous being as an op for probing attack and claimed the sleep deprivation was causing mental breaks. I know there was something else. College showed me that there are unseen forces in this world. There should be a new location for Ranger School because there is a darkness that stalks Appalachia.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I get it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.